All right, so that was it for the recap. There's a few key moments there, but it was kind of interesting to see the Kibler. I think the emphasis on Kibler's performance, like we saw a slightly marginal play with the the non-Fel Reaver and the Flame Tongue Totem. So he's a really solid player overall, and he's doing probably the best as an individual as than anyone else in the league so far. He's far ahead of anyone else for the Master of Duels title, which is basically going to be awarded to the player who's got the best individual score. And he's going to get, $5,000 bonus on top of possible game winnings. So let's go over the format of the entire event. I mean, it's a team conquest format. You have teams of 3 players. You have 6 decks per team, so each team will be bringing 2 decks per player. They'll be allocated preemptively, so you can't just switch in the middle of it. You'll have one class, obviously, one deck per class, and you have to blind pick. So you don't know what your opponent's going to queue into you next. So you have to try to make the best educated guess as to what you're going to be queuing into, maybe trying to get your best matchups and whatnot. And the goal is to win with all of your decks. Once you've done that, you win the entire series. And in the case of a player losing 2 matches in a row, he's going to be benched, which means he can't play again until one of his teammates grabs a win from their opponents. So it's a little bit of a tricky format, I think. I mean, Shocky, you've been playing into this quite a bit. How does it feel like conquest-wise? Do you have any strategy, or do you just kind of throw decks in there and hope they're going to stick?
We kind of have strategy. I feel like every team's kind of the same on this page. It's like this sort of strategy, but at the end of the day, it's conquest. You're kind of just throwing out, like you said, it's blind pick. You just kind of hope. And some weeks you get the best of that. Recently, we really haven't gotten the best of that, so you feel kind of
Yeah.
like really unlucky when you literally just get the worst matchups possible. And so, I mean, there's a little bit of luck to it, maybe some strategy to it, but the fact
Yeah.
that it's a best of 11 kind of helps balance all that out.
Yeah, the sheer amount of games. Go ahead, Monk.
Yeah, I was just saying, going back to the Master of Duels thing with
Right.
Kibler having an 8-0 lead pretty much over everyone else, I think that doesn't paint a very clear picture in the sense that it's very easy for Kibler to just crash and burn in any given week. I know coming from Liquid's losses, in one week we had everyone doing well, but Savitz went 0-5, and another week we had everyone doing well, but Show went 0-6. So it's certainly possible for just one player to have a really bad week, and it just speaks to the format of this league. So Kibler definitely he's in the lead, but he's definitely hasn't clinched it yet.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds very optimistic. Oh god. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I could see that. Go ahead.
Things can change really fast. I mean, the one week we had like 5 4-0 players, and I think everyone but Kibler all lost. Like Life Coach lost 3 times, and he doesn't really even need to crash and burn necessarily. Like just going 2-2 isn't really that great if you really are fighting for the highest win percentage overall. Like 50%, nobody's going to tell you that's like bad, but it's very likely someone else does better. And I mean, we saw kind of like in the standings, Hyped and Firebat are kind of on his tail. They only have 3 losses. So, for instance, if Kibler went like 2-3 and one of those players went 2-0, suddenly it's just tied up.
Yeah, I like that point because it's very easy to accumulate in a conquest format. A huge amount of losses. You mentioned 5 or 6. That's just one bad week, as you say, could just ruin Kibler's record, where he might end up, 8-5. We don't wish that for him, but it might just happen. So yeah, I don't know. I hope we'll see some more of that shaman. Is all I'm asking for. It's one of those classes that at the beginning of the league wasn't very popular, and then somehow it picked up like massively in popularity. What do you think about it? Like, do you think it's a class that you expect people to bring this week again, or did things settle down a bit?
There's kind of like this new mech shaman list, and I don't think it was actually the one Kibler was playing. It's kind of been developed like in the last 2 weeks, and I
Okay.
guess I guess it was Team Archon that kind of developed it, and it's much faster. It plays Leroy Jenkins. A lot of people are kind of hopping on that, and it's done really well in open tournaments. So I'd expect to see that deck a little more. I'm not sure if it'll fit into every lineup because it is still, it's not top 3, probably not top 4, but it's fighting for that spot of 5th/6th deck.
All
And
right.
if
Well, we'll see.
teams value it, we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
uh,
I,
it's always
I,
a toss up.
I believe that list actually originates from Korea, and what happened was like some NA players like Boxception and Nostum got a hold of the list, and from there everyone began playing it in North American open tournaments, and you can kind of see it on the North American ladder. And from there, Firebat got that list and played
Made
around
it.
with it in a few tournaments, and
But
then Zalay played around with that as well. And not only that, I believe 6-0 played in it played with it quite a lot in the OGN.
He played it in OGN. Yep.
Exactly,
So
and
it's possible
he did
they
quite
do
well
bring
in
it.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
speaking of 6-0, he's been doing pretty well lately, right? And
Yeah.
guess
Yeah.
what? We have a player intro for 6-0. Let's check that out.
that's crazy.
Smooth.
Yeah, I'm Xixer, playing for Team Archon, and been mostly known for playing open tournaments and generally everything that's open to everyone, so open tournaments and ladder. Yeah, Twitch chat thinks I only play face decks, so I guess that's what I'm most known for. There have been formats like that in the very early phases of Hearthstone, which were lots of fun, so I'm really glad that formats like that come back, and I think my team is probably the favorite to win the tournament. Yeah, thanks for watching. I hope I get to play lots of games. No, actually no, it's Conquest. I hope I only get to play 2 games every week. But yeah, thanks for watching.
Well, to keep on going with the smoothness, I guess we'll mention that Team Archon, the team in which you enumerated all the players prior to the spotlight, is going to be playing against Value Town shortly. It's a team that, I mean, both teams have been doing fairly okay. I think they have a similar result. Value Town is 3-1, where Team Archon is 2-2. But all it takes here is for Value Town to lose, and they're going to be equal in score, at least as far as the total wins and losses for series. So let's take a look at the lineup. Anything stands out as unusual?
Firebat playing Warrior is extremely unusual. I know Firebat, he doesn't really like Control Warrior, and Zalay and 6-0 seem to be like the standard like patron warrior players that everyone knows and loves. Like pretty much within the Hearthstone scene, you have like 5 or 6 players that really like are dedicated to patron play. And I would consider 6-0 and Zalay 2 of them, but not necessarily Firebat. Oh,
Ooh.
well, okay.
Aha!
Yeah.
There was we were baited out. You know what, Monk? Your observation skills are through the roof. This is amazing. Wow,
Well,
amazing pickup.
There goes that analysis.
Yeah. Anything else from your side, Shocky?
Yeah, so Kibler switched from Shaman to Druid. That's kind of been his go-to classes. He did play Druid 1 week, and I believe it was actually the week they lost, but of course he did win both of his matches, so it went fine. But the team dropped the match, and I think that was like, of all the weeks, that was the one that Value Town learned a lot from when they lost to my team, Forsen Boys, because not only did they bring kind of a weaker deck in the Paladin deck, but they didn't bring Freeze Mage. They kind of psyched themselves out. And from what I've learned from like talking to a bunch of people about this league format is that the more games you add, the better Freeze Mage really gets, because it only has so many bad matchups, like against Warrior, and you're so much less likely to queue it. Whereas as you add these lower tier decks, Shaman, Priest, Paladin, all of them are bad against Freeze Mage, and that's like a common trend of the bad decks. So Freeze Mage really preys on a lot of decks, and it's almost guaranteed to get a win. And so I think almost every single team brings Freeze Mage, and the weeks that they haven't really worked out.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. The point about Freeze Mage is that, like, how many decks really hard counter it? I guess you could say Druid's a decent matchup against it, and you've got probably the Patron and Control Warrior, which, I mean, we haven't seen any Control Warrior really in tournament play. It's decent on ladder. Even then, it's phasing out because of the addition of too much weapon hate, I guess, and a lot of techs for people. So I guess the only difference here again is that 6th class. We expect Mage, Rogue, Hunter, Warlock, Warrior, and then you have a 6th spot that you kind of have to fill. And in this case, Value Town went with Druid, where Team Archon picked Shaman. You think it's gonna be a mech?
Yeah, I think it'll be that
Almost
fast
certainly.
mech Shaman. 6-0's been playing that not only just on ladder and in some tournaments, but he played it in probably the biggest match he's ever played, which was like his round of 8 in OGN, and he went 2-0 in his group. So he's very confident with it. I mean, it can be kind of like an emotional choice where, oh, I did really well with this recently. I'm going to keep going with it. So, and I mean, it is, at worst, if he loses with it, you can say, like, well, that was our 6th class. Like, it's not supposed to, win every game.
Yeah, I can see that.
Going back to the Freeze Mage point, though, I feel like more and more Archon League is leaning, like, it doesn't favor Freeze Mage as much because, first of all, Shaman became a lot more popular, And I feel like some of the newer lists, especially with that run Double Doomhammer and Leroy, they have just so much burst. And I know, Chalky, how familiar you are with Double Doomhammer and Shaman.
I am,
Yes.
man. It was crazy that no one else realized running 2 of a card is nice sometimes. But yeah, it's
Right.
just kind of that question of consistency, and especially in aggro decks, you really, in my opinion, have to be able to justify why you're running 1 of something and not 2. And for Doomhammer, it is sort of justifiable because the diminishing returns on drawing the second one is really so bad. But with most cards in these aggro decks, like even Ironbeak Owl, stuff like that, when people run 1, I'm kind of just like, why? Just put in a second one.
Make it more consistent. Well, we missed the mulligan phase here, but we do see the 2 players into their first game. So we do see the Leroy Jenkins. Turns out there is, in fact, going to be that exact version that we talked about before the match started. And a Mech Shaman with double Fireguard Destroyer. That's the one.
Yeah, I don't even think this deck runs Fel Reaver. I don't know, Monk does it?
It doesn't. It cuts both. It cuts pretty much all the BGH targets, like both Fel Reavers, the Dr. Boom and Ragnaros, and it pretty much like the highest curving cards are Leroy, Lotheb, and the double Doomhammers.
Yeah, so it really took one of those weak points out. Like we kind of watched the Kibler playing around Big Game Hunter, but at that point, like if you really don't want to coin out a Fel Reaver on turn 4,
Why
like,
play?
why are you playing that card? Yeah, so that kind of became a big thing, and players have started cutting stuff like that, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
it's one of your biggest threats, and you don't even want to play it when you can to get the maximum swing potential, so there's really no point adding it to your deck. What were you going to say, Monk?
Yeah, I was gonna say I kind of want to talk about the stats of this matchup. Of course, I always
Right.
do. And usually the problem with like getting stats for decks that aren't too commonly played is that you just don't have huge sample sizes, like with Mech Shaman, for instance. But if you just go over like Shaman versus General Hunter, the stats are actually 13-1 in favor of Hunter. So that's like an extremely favorable matchup.
13-1? Wow, okay.
Well, especially against Mech Shaman, I think it's actually really good just in that area. People might look at that and be like, okay, they beat mid-range Shaman, so what? But the Hunter cards line up super well with the early game in the Mech Shaman. Freezing Trap is insane, and 6-0 did get a pretty good... He got his Cogmaster frozen, which isn't a huge deal. But, like, imagine if there was a Freezing Trap up right now, that 7-6 is basically useless. And 6-0 doesn't really have a great way to proc Freezing Trap. There's just a lot of units on the board, and the Mech Shaman doesn't really play Lightning Storm or anything. So.
Yeah, some variants have, but it's not exactly the most common card to include in that. Like, I've seen about 2 lists that run a single one of them, and even then, you can't say that they're going to perform better generally. Like, maybe you tech it in against a specific metagame, but against the field, I think this is a more common deck. Well, that's a lot of damage output, though.
Yep.
How easy is it to shut down?
He can kill the 7-6 off fairly easily and keep pushing some damage, and the 4-6 isn't a huge deal. He'll probably be putting out like... So he has the option. He can put out Savannah Highmane, or he can get out the Mad Scientist as soon as possible, because the Mad Scientist, like I said, the freezing traps are so key in this matchup to let you ignore a 6 health target, which basically means pushing 6 damage to face, which is equivalent to just having a Savannah Highmane down.
Yeah, and what's crazy about it too is that because you have the Glaive Zuka, you can also remove the smaller threads that would otherwise eat up the freezing trap. So it's giving you a bit more viability there.
That's actually a pretty good totem there.
Yeah, it's basically a heal for 7. It's going to get the 4 healing immediately, and then 6 is going to have to deal with it, so... yeah, this almost like frees up Kibler to play the Savannah Highmane. I wouldn't have minded seeing like Juggler, Scientist, Glaive Zuka, or Hero Power.
Yeah, and this is probably like the best matchup to get this in. As the Hunter player, you generally want to be very aggressive and you don't really care about healing. Except against the Mech Shaman that just has so much burst.
Well, if you actually look at it, 6-0's hand has 17 damage plus 4 on board. That'd be 21 over the course of 2 turns. That would actually just be lethal had Kibler not gotten that totem. So, as he might say, you know, he's sometimes fortunate, I believe it is.
So, yeah, sometimes fortunate. That's exactly what he says. But I'm like, there is still not out of it for 6-0 yet, because he's not quite dead. There's no double kill command in Kibler's hands. So, you know, getting a top deck of a, let's say, a Crackle could do it.
I don't think
I think he has to kill the totem. Yeah.
Exactly.
because it
It
heals
makes no
for
sense.
4.
Right.
Right.
Like it. That
So,
would have made
of
no
course it's
sense.
Yeah. But it is a little surprising. He probably would have liked to efficiently remove it with like Rock Biter or Lightning Bolt because the damage lines up better and you get to get that 4 to face. But he had to kind of play out on curve with his minions.
What to do?
So now Kibler basically wants to put himself in a safe position where he's not dead over a few turns. But the best way to put yourself in a safe position against aggro is to make sure you're racing them as well. So like if Kibler could set up a 2-turn lethal, that could be better than playing defensively potentially here.
Yeah, if you get Earthshock, the Savannah Highmane here, you're gonna kind of dislike what follows up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, 6-0 does play at least one Earthshock, I know. I saw the list he played in OGN, so that card is at least in his deck one time. It looks like Kibler is playing pretty defensively here, and
It might
think
pay
it,
off
it
anyway.
could work out pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very fair, especially since the Mech Shaman, it typically doesn't run as many minions as a hybrid hunter,
He
basically.
took 1 extra damage, yeah. Well, he noticed it immediately, but... Okay, so that probably won't get in damage, so 6-0 just is sitting on that, How much
Yeah.
damage does he have here? It's 17, so he needs 5 more.
he needs 5 more from the hand, which is a lucky crackle away from the win. But he's got exactly 1 turn to find it, basically. And even
Well,
yeah,
Yeah, the Leroy is really awkward because that's what you want to play first because it doesn't overload.
right.
But it could die to the Knife Juggler, and even if it doesn't, it gives your opponent 2 extra power and 2 juggles. So, like, if those hit your face, are you really happy?
Kill command would kill you right afterwards, assuming
Yeah,
there's like
so-
another source of damage from the hand. So yeah, that would be a really risky move. But at the same time, like, is he just gonna decide to hold on and wait for the Leroy? I mean, is it gonna get better than this if a freezing trap comes out? If he smashes the Mad Scientist into something that you play,
Yeah, you have to set yourself up to win, so this is probably correct. And
and it
I'm
works.
not sure why he didn't totem first, though, or
Oh.
play.
Oh my god! And there it goes.
So that's
Full face.
perfect. Yeah.
This is just as good as he can get
And
it.
shitty lightning bolt, I guess it doesn't really matter, so hold on to it. And
So
I don't think this is lethal from Kibler.
I don't think so.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Wait, it is 6.
It was 20.
Oh yeah,
it was
the Warfire
21
was
without a
21
jug.
damage with yeah,
Wow.
21.
So
Okay.
the Vitality Totem honestly made a world of a difference that game. Sometimes
Well-
fortunate, I guess.
Well, there's a few cards. I mean, it's about to get a little worse with the new expansion, but not by a long shot.
Well, there's that one that kills you even more that's coming. So
right.
that'll be fun.
There's the Wrath Guard. There's the guy that removes a mana crystal, and the one that can't attack unless you use your hero power. So Paladin Shredder got nerfed.
subtle
these-
nerfs.
Subtle one, but I think it'll still be a pretty solid 4-drop, by the way. Well, first game for Value Town, so, I mean, Kibler still takes another win, doesn't lose just yet, so is it going to be another flawless day for him? I don't know. He's got a Druid lined up. That's a pretty tough one to steal a win with.
Yeah, it really depends on what he can queue into. Like Monk said, the Freeze Mage is one of those surprisingly good matchups. So, like, Freeze Mage doesn't really expect to have many bad matchups. The Warrior is the one you expect, but when your opponents bring Druid, it's kind of like, okay, there's another really bad matchup.
Mhm.
And if Firebat's been playing Zoo a lot, so that's not that great, but if he did happen to bring Handlock, then the Druid could have been, like, a brilliant pick.
I think there's no way Firebat is bringing Handlock. I don't think I've ever seen him play Handlock, actually. Like-
Not in tournaments that I can remember, not in tournaments at all.
He's
There's like
kind
a-
of known for Zoo.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's kind of a few like decks that Firebat never plays, even though he is known as one of the players that plays the most decks overall. Like, he doesn't play Handlock, he doesn't play Control Warrior. And those are like pretty interesting decks, I'd say.
For a while, they were like dominant, so it's surprising. Like, he probably plays them very well, but maybe he doesn't find them nearly as consistent or in line with his playstyle as he'd like. It's kind of weird though when you think about it, because they're such strong decks.
Well, in this format, it works out really well because if you do think that you need to play Handlock, you can just give it to a teammate if you don't feel confident.
Right.
And they haven't, like, so I would say it doesn't just go to show that he doesn't want to play them. I would say they just don't think they're that strong right now. Like, there is Patron Warrior, there is Zoo. So, like, if those are stronger than the alternatives, then you just stick with those.
Yeah, I don't see Control Warrior making its way into the tournament. Like, I'm curious to know though if we'll ever see Trump play the Zoo deck here in this format, because I know he's a handlock aficionado at this point, and he likes to play the slow game. I don't know if
Right.
he'd ever bring anything but handlock, or maybe even mid-range demon law.
Well, there is a lot of merit in just seeing what your opponents have played and kind of molding your lineup to that. I think a lot of teams, especially Value Town, do that. Like we've seen Value Town switch up not only tech choices but deck choices quite a bit.
Alright. There
This
must be a mistake here. Kibler already locked the game with his hunter, so this has to be another match coming right up. I wonder if those that are actually the two players we're going to be playing, because... Oh,
No.
never mind. Change of plans. It's going to be Firebat playing Warlock versus Dog's potential Freeze Mage. It has to be that.
Yeah. Well, Dog has played Mech Mage before in a previous week, so I wouldn't like count him out like for that. But because Firebat or because Archon is known for playing Zoo, I would expect this to be Freeze Mage. Like they don't play Druid as often, and that's what you're really targeting with Mech Mage.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to looking at your opposition, and Value Town does that a lot. They brought Mech Mage a week where they knew they'd probably go into a lineup with Druid and a lineup with Handlock.
Handlock with Firebat. We were just talking about how he wasn't going to play that.
You even
What
see
is
Firebat
going
was
on?
like Firebat was like faking the coin, which Dog probably was like, okay, so he has a knife juggler. Nope.
And it's like, this is a bad Zoo hand. Oh, wait.
And
What
this is
that
like
life trap?
this is like the perfect handlock hand against Freeze Mage. Like you already have your two giants, which like there are the cards that help you win the game or like that win you in the game, and then you have Ragnaros to follow that up. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Firebat kept Ragnaros in his opening hand.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think it's one of the cards. It's one of the few cards that really makes Freeze Mage awkward to play in the late game, because it's much like Rogue. You kind of have to, except it's worse. You kind of have to deal with it, but you can't quite do it very efficiently if you do it at all. So you might just throw away your win condition because you're trying to remove an 8/8. Oh wow.
So one thing is like, okay, so Archon decided they wanted to play Handlock. There is merit. There's small merit to keeping Firebat as the player of that class, because like you guys didn't expect it. It's kind of like when you see Firebat playing Warlock, he's played Zoo all the time. It's probably just Zoo. So
Yeah, I watch a lot of Hearthstone games, and like I said, I've never seen him play Handlock. And not only that, pretty much every tournament Firebat has ever won, he's played Zoo in. Like like BlizzCon, obviously, Gfinity #1, Gfinity #2, and even the recent Star Ladder games he played Zoo in. And pretty much every week of Archon League, or actually every week of Archon League, he played Zoo.
pretty big Zoo player, but sometimes you got to change it up in the team format, not be too predictable. And like you said, this hand is really solid to face off against Freeze Mage, especially since he picked up that Owl. That was really the one card I think he needed to draw at some point to really lock up a dominant position. So now he's not vulnerable to like Frost Nova Doomsayer.
Yeah, which is exactly what Dog is lining up to do. But the thing is, Dog is then forced to find another source of freeze to at least stall until he can remove those minions off the board. Or by the time he can do that, Firebat's going to be dropping his Ragnaros on the board, and then that's going to be a bit problematic. I like this play from Dog.
Yeah, it's pretty likely to get you 8 health because your opponent doesn't really want to leave it there. Firebat could just go face. I mean, it is 16 damage. He could like Loatheb to lock him out, but I mean, leaving an Emperor up against Freeze Mage is kind of risky. But the cards Dog really got Emperor aren't that insane.
He's got a Loatheb. Firebat just picked up Loatheb as well, so he's got two safeguards, the double mountain, the Ragnaros. I mean, how do you throw this away?
I think he's going to Shadow Flame and Mortal Coil, yeah.
Nice play.
Doesn't really waste any damage is the main thing. You get to push the 16, you get to save Loatheb and your Owl, and the Hellfire, which can help to pop the second block if that
and the
is
health
there.
of the Giants too, because that's a meaningful thing. If they did lose, one of them goes down to 3 health, it's that much easier to remove from Dog's perspective. So again, very well done.
Yeah, this is... Okay, so because of the Emperor, he got to fit in the heal bot as well, which is pretty key. It's going to save him from getting popped this turn. And now Firebat has to use the Owl on the Doomsayer most likely. Well, yeah, of course you use it
Why
on
not?
the Giant instead. Right. Just to line up that Ragnaros shot better late game.
Late game, you mean on the next turn?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, probably soon enough.
Soon enough.
But there's a chance that Dog can pick up the damage output if Lotheb's not played on time. I mean, he's got double Frostbolt Ice Lance. How far is he from getting like a Fireball and just sealing it? Because he's got 2 Ice Blocks and the Ice Barrier, so his life's not quite in danger just yet.
And Pyroblast could also put him like really close to finishing because that's 11 in his hand right now. Yeah, 11 with the hero power. If you can fit in 2 more hero powers somehow, which with the second Ice Block is pretty likely, then if Firebat doesn't have the healing, you can just burn him out with Pyroblast.
Yeah, it's not that far off either.
So Firebat's really weighing in on if he should play this Lotheb or if he should just play a threat. Because the Lotheb doesn't really do much right now. We know from Dog's hand, like, he probably didn't want to play that many spells. It does kind of deny, like, Arcane Intellect, but it's going to guarantee a pop next turn, essentially.
Yeah. Now, what Dog does with his heal bot is going to give Firebat an indication of what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if he just went full face with this. At this point, with the way you have to play as Mage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. He actually has the 3 damage from heal bot.
I don't think he, like, there's not that much merit to clearing off minions since your opponent has lethal anyway, and you actually don't have any freeze effects in your hand. So there's not really a point on freezing or, like, clearing off the board at this point.
You could survive if you played Ice Barrier and like killed the Owl, and then you'd be alive by 1, I think. So that's probably not worth it because
How do you win?
Handlock has so many things to do 1 damage. Like that Defender Vargas would just pop the block anyway. And Earthen Ring Farseer could come in pretty big here for Firebat. Because I think what's going to happen is Dog's going to have to go for the bird next turn. He's going to set up the second Ice Block, and then he's going to try and draw into like Pyroblast or double Fireball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's got at least 1 Fireball possibly from Arcane Intellect, almost reliably, considering like he's got about 4 draws to go. But the Pyroblast is going to be a little tougher to find.
Yeah, and he's now. I feel like the fact that Firebat went with that heal earlier, now Dog knows he needs more. He knows the Pyroblast won't be enough. But like you said, he gets, I believe he actually gets 5 draws between now and when the game ends.
Oh yeah, the Acolyte of Pain. I didn't consider that one, you're right.
Two draws for turn, 2 draws from Arcane Locked, and at least a draw from Acolyte of Pain. I would assume Firebat will probably kill that off. That way Dog can't ping it.
And what does Dog pick up is the Alex. Actually, whoa. That could help. He can't do it. He's dead.
Yeah.
You're right. One more Emperor trigger would have been needed.
Right. It was just barely too late. Blizzard doesn't really help much. Again, he's really looking for burn spells because he knows if you Blizzard right now, it's very likely that the handlock can pop you anyway. I think you have to start going for that draw and start trying to burn your opponent.
What to do? What to do?
But how can you really get there? I guess you'd need the second Ice Lance and Pyroblast or double Fireball. So it's really unlikely.
I mean, if you, I was gonna say, if you Blizzard Ice Block, your opponent has Dark Bomb to kill you. Like in this case, he's got Ragnaros as well, so you're kind of worried. Hellfire would help you, sort of, because you.
Well, not really, because you didn't.
Yeah,
get
you would
any
still
burn
die.
off.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to deal damage.
So he needs to go for burn this turn, and he needs to get the draws off. So there's Pyroblast, but it's not enough without a second Ice Lance.
Well, what about Nova? Well, no, he's got to go for the Frostbolt.
Yeah, well,
there's no way.
Now he has to reconsider. Now I think you actually have to go for the Nova Ice Block.
Yeah, definitely.
Because even if you fire all this burn at your opponent's face, it's not enough. So it's a losing play line. Now this probably ends up losing him the game too, but it's basically what he has.
Actually, wait, you Blizzard afterwards. Oh no, Rag is going to finish it off. I was going to say Blizzard could actually help out.
You could get a minion to go along with the Blizzard. I'm a little surprised he didn't play Twilight Drake.
Well,
It would
Blizzard
help,
Mad
maybe.
Scientist could work, right? There's a chance. There's
Yeah.
a chance that Blizzard Mad Scientist Ice Barrier works. A slight
Mhm.
chance. Or
I
do you
don't
try
really think you
Blizzard?
need the Ice Barrier. I think you
What to
you
do?
You
probably
need the
like
minion at least, right?
yeah, you definitely need the minion, and you want to hit. You either want to ping your opponent's face or fire off one of those frost bolts and one of the ice lances just to get the burn going.
So he's betting on no Dark Bomb. If he's going for the Frostbolt Ice Lance here, he's betting on no Ragnaros, and either way he's dead to Dark Bomb, so he doesn't really care.
Oh, all right. So
That is
this
game.
makes a lot of well. He basically has to go for this
Yeah,
because if you play the Mad Scientist, you don't set your opponent to 10, and in that case,
you still die.
you have to top deck the second Blizzard next turn, and it just gets into this case of like, yeah, like you said, you're just going to die eventually. So he had to go for it that turn.
Well played by both players though. Even though in the end Firebat takes this, I think Dog's line of play was pretty good considering the pressure he was up against. I mean, that was a lot of threats from the handlock player.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Monk is out. Hello, picture of Monk.
Rip Monk.
Yeah, rest in pepperonis.
It was a really well played game from Firebat. He did get fortunate draws, but I think it was mostly just also a smart decision to bring handlock in the first place. It was a bit of a surprise. We don't really know if Dog mulliganed incorrectly or anything, but it was definitely not something that Value Town was really expecting going into preparation for this week.
Yeah, another deck's locked too, so that's going to give the surprise factor the expected, outcome where you don't have to really replay that deck afterwards once you've sprung the trap on your opponent. Because sometimes you bring a surprising deck and then it loses, and then everybody knows what's coming, and
Yeah.
that's just terrible. Whereas in this case, Firebat piloted the deck to the win, so it ended up working out pretty nicely. So I wonder if Dog's gonna be requeued at this point. Like the benching rule still doesn't. Like, how penalizing would the benching rule be in this position?
So the main issue of the benching rule, like if Dog were to be benched, that means Rogue and Mage can't be played. And so Archon would then want to queue the decks that do best against everything else. So I'm not sure it has too much implication because Rogue and Mage aren't really like that
Hard
kind
counters
of
or
yeah,
weak
they don't
everything.
really hard counter that much stuff. I guess you would throw out maybe like your own Rogue because you would be sure to avoid the Freeze Mage matchup. So that could maybe help. But other than that, it's really not a huge deal. And there's also kind of like this mind game where there's two ways to look at it. Okay, your opponent's lost. They probably don't want to send out the same player. But at the same time, is that more likely than any other deck? Because basically like 20% just across the board if they roll the dice to see which deck they'd pick. But
Yeah,
are
if
they
they
more
just-
likely than that to send out Dog again?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Like, I don't think they'll send out Druid from Kibler, although he could try to lock down the win now. It's just that he's not likely to queue into a matchup that he really likes. And if he faces off against Rogue, some people debate which of the two classes has an edge in the matchup, like Rogue versus Druid. Like, some people have started giving it back to Druid. For a while, Rogue was considered dominant. Do you think either way it's like a coin flip, or is there one that like clearly is superior to the other?
I think Monk would say stat-wise, Druid has done best against Rogue. It's gotten
Yeah.
the best of it a little bit, but again, Rogue players are the kind of the type of players to stereotype a bit that will say that they're favored in that matchup.
Of course,
Kinda
yeah.
think-
There's a little bit of
thinking
confirmation
back.
bias, right? Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
just
yeah.
I win everything. So
No,
my
no. You
classes-
just have to draw prep sap and sprint
Yeah, it's-
and minions and
Yeah, dude.
flurry.
Don't you know prep sap prep eviscerate for tempo is like my convenient turn 6 play after I drop something on the board, and I have
So-
Vow Teacher, of course.
This might have been just pure luck.
Yeah.
I feel kind of bad talking about it, but like this is technically the mind game here. Like I said, you'd want to play Rogue if you don't think they'd send out Dog. But then from
But-
Value Town's point of view, if you think they're going to do that, you just send out Dog again.
Yeah, and with the freeze mage, which in this
Yeah.
case is pretty well off. So
So Value Town kind of got the best of this matchup queue, whether that was maybe mind games or just luck. Who knows?
all right, I think Monk might be back with us. He doesn't seem to hear us.
Monk, come back.
Oh well, no
We
worries.
miss you.
All right, so Mad Scientist gets developed early on, not really a big deal. I think what's really important here is Dog already has his Emperor Thorson for later, so it's a good deal.
Yeah. And this is a really kind of strange hand from the mage. Like, he has so much burn that you almost feel bad about using it for removal. But one of the things is if the rogue pressures you enough, you do end up having to use quite a bit of burn just on their minions. Like, if a Violet Teacher comes out next turn, one of the best responses to that is just Fireball it.
Right.
One of the best responses is 3-2, and the 3/3s is just Frostbolt it. But if you use up all your burn, it's kind of a lot harder to win.
Yeah,
So
it's actually
really-
going to be problematic for him if he just throws out his burn as removal. I think this is one of the few cases where that's the last thing you want to do.
Yep. It's one of those things where really you want like Blizzard and Flame Strike because you can't point those at face, so you feel fine throwing those out. But in the early game, if the rogue pressures you too much, you do feel really bad about kind of just leaving the minions out there. So Dog's just going to get rid of the Frostbolt, knowing, yeah, it's a lot of burn, but you also have to survive to the point where burn is relevant.
So there's 2 Auto Barbers in that rogue deck. Alright, so that's a lot of... did he expect an aggressive deck to be played out here? Because that 2-drop is not... Is it that typical? I haven't
No.
seen as much of it like as a 2-of. I've seen 1-ofs very frequently, but...
I think you could expect an Assassin's Blade, maybe, as that card goes really well with that. And that's... There's not much you can do about that from Dog's point of view. Like, if he draws Assassin's Blade, you're unhappy because it's just so much damage. But it is kind of one of those newer lists. I forget who exactly made that rogue list, but it does just kind of play Auto Barbers for a little more aggression. Sometimes plays Assassin's Blade. I think it might have been Mr. Yagud. At least I saw him playing it a lot.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people put in Assassin's Blade. Like, it in 1 week, it kind of set itself back in the metagame all of a sudden, and it took everyone by surprise. Unfortunately, it kind of suffers from the same problem as Control Warrior does very often, where people are starting to tech against weapons as a result of Grim Patron, and as a result, Control Warrior is suffering from it, and Rogue is also partially in a, kind of the friendly fire, I guess you could say. Crossfire, rather.
Yeah.
So...
Just kind of taking collateral damage from the fact that Patron is so
good.
So
yeah,
hated.
I don't know. It's probably... I almost want to say it's one of the best deck that's ever hit Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Like, relative, even in the context of all the relative power of other decks in their time and in their prime, I think Grim Patron is just shattering records.
Yeah, and the fact that it's so good, because I also feel like one of the things is the scene has developed so much to where everyone's playing a lot better than we used to. I mean, back when Miracle Rogue was a thing and kind of just hitting the surface, a lot of the decks weren't really refined. A lot of them could have been a lot better.
Right.
And now everyone kind of has refined decks. Everyone's playing really well, and still Patron is destroying people.
Yeah, you would expect that when you... I think one of the strangest things about Patron is that whenever you end up teching against it, it doesn't take long for, the metagame to shift to where Patron can suddenly come back up to counter those counter decks to the counter decks. It's like the cycle is very quick, whereby Patron will come back in to be relevant. Oh man, 6-0 does have that prep sap and that Loathev.
Yeah. He could just double Tinkers and hit face this turn.
Yeah.
That'd be 20 across 2 turns. It might force out just like Ice Lance from Dog out of fear. Looks like he's going to be a little more patient than that, though. Pretty interesting that he just pops the Loatheb this early. Like, it's not really denying much from Dog. It's going to set up an oil target, so maybe next turn he'll have lethal, and that's probably what he was going for. Like, if you prep double Tinkers... Oh, wow.
Illustrate even. Devil prep.
Yeah.
Wow, that is nasty burst. Okay, yeah, definitely
each
what
Tinkers
was going for.
Each Tinkers is worth 6 damage, and the Abyss is worth 4, so that's 14, 19... 23, so he actually would have been one off popping it. That'd be awkward. There was a heal bot anyway, so... And there's also an ice barrier, so he's not really that close, even though he has all of this damage. Dog has had all of the healing.
Yeah, that's kind of the awkward thing about playing All Rogue, is that very often you do get huge bursts, but against a deck like Freeze Mage, very often you're short of a little bit of damage, and unless one of your minions sticks on the board, which tends not to happen, getting recurring damage in is very tough. So you start eventually relying on that little last-ditch dagger hit that you're hoping will do something, but it's often too late because then they start healing up with Healbot, Alex Straza, name it, and suddenly you're out of reach. Or you're dead,
Yeah.
of course.
Too soon.
Yeah, I mean, Sixo's gotten double sprint. He's gotten 2 preps with both oils and all of this damage. It's like, you can't really ask for much more, but at the same time, he's still quite a ways off killing Dog.
Yeah.
So he's gonna get it started, though. This is gonna be pushing for 21 this turn. Oh, man. Well, if there were ever a time for Acidic Swamp Ooze, I suppose this would be it.
I mean, Doug still doesn't quite. Oh, never
Ooh,
mind. Never
that
mind
is-
that. That is lethal,
That is
right?
so
Next turn.
big.
That is so sick. Yeah.
That
All-
changes
all-
everything because he was
It's
just
over.
going to have to he was just going to have to fireball that Lotheb this turn and play defensively, but now suddenly he has a much better game plan.
Yeah.
Well,
Alex draws out of face and win, right? That
well,
sounds
you
like a
have
decent
to-
game plan.
I feel like that's going to be it. Yeah, he has to go for that. But Dog is thinking like, okay, my opponent's used a lot of damage. I could go for a defensive plan. I could Alex myself later. My opponent's pretty likely to have a heal bot or an Earthen Ring Farseer. He already used Lotheb, so that's out of the way. I feel like even without thinking about the hands, so, you know, obviously we have like caster bias. There is no heal. Go for it.
Right.
But
Yeah,
even
you-
without that knowledge, this is probably his best chance of winning.
Yeah. If you'd been playing around Healbot, in a case like this one, it might have looked like an Ice Lance on Lotheb, but then you expect Blade Flurry, so your Alex Straza is dead, ergo you have
Yeah.
no win condition. So by doing this, Dog is setting himself up to where he can still win from hand, assuming his opponent doesn't both trade away his Lotheb, in which case he doesn't have immediate lethal, and he can't pop your eyes block right away.
And
It's a really
that's
nice
actually
situation.
going to be it. He did not draw a heal. He didn't have a heal, so Dog's kind of sweating it over there, but once he realizes there's no
Right.
heal, pretty good life. Yeah, so this Pirate's a little important for 6-0 because he gets to take his opponent to 4, which is conveniently right in the range of Eviscerate for next turn. But obviously this is just wishful thinking for him, hoping Dog doesn't have the kill.
I mean, at this point, if you've seen him Alex your face, you have to assume, and you know he hasn't been really playing the Flame Strike or Blizzard game, so you kind of have to assume it. And Dog's gonna
Yeah, that
seal
was-
the game with his Freeze Mage, so that's out of the way for him.
Mm-hmm. Such a pretty shocking win. It really seemed like 6-0 had a really insane draw that game, and Dog, I guess, just had just enough. Didn't really draw into much cycle that game. It was basically just the burn and the top deck Alex on turn 9.
Yeah, well, it's if he hadn't drawn that Alex Straza, the game might have gone to 6-0, if only just because he's got more sustain, whereas in this case, as you said, Dog would have had to fireball Lotheb, or
Yep.
start, Ice Lancing to stall, which doesn't feel good at all. That would have been a losing play. Over time, it would have been very unlikely that he comes back unless he top decks perfectly after that point.
Yeah.
Well,
So the Value Town takes the lead once again. Really, neither team has gotten any of those kind of big wins out of the way. I would say we kind of talked about Shaman and Druid are the weak links, if there are any, for these two lineups. So you really want to get good matchups for those and hopefully get a win. I'd say if those decks go head to head, the Shaman's pretty favored. It's one of those matchups
I would
that really
venture to
preys
say
on.
so. It plays like Zoo a little bit, right? In the same way that Druid has a really tough time spot removing minions that have just a little bit too much health, and Mech Shaman's pretty good getting those minions on the board. And at some point, unless you're running a weird variation with Wild Pyros and Starfall, there's no way you're going to get them off the board. It's just so difficult. Like, I don't think we'll see any Mill Druid coming from Kibler anytime soon.
That'd be pretty interesting to throw out Mildred when you're 9-0, competing for $5,000 for having the best record.
Wouldn't that just be like the most BM thing to do? Just to throw it
Yeah.
out there and be like, yeah, you see, I can win with Mildred as well.
I can win
man."
with anything. Yeah, I am the master of duels.
Yeah, oh man, that'd be really epic though. If we saw a Volcanic Lumberer, you remember that Tides list that he played?
Yeah, I
that,
do.
That was so good. Oh man, Kibler, if you're listening, please swap decks.
You know, I
Mid-game.
think even if Kibler cheated and changed his list to Mildred, nobody would really mind.
Yeah, I think they'd still be fine with it. Yeah,
Be like,
even
"Yeah,
the
we'll allow it."
organizers would be like, you know what, that's fine. We haven't seen that in a bit. All right, Xixo versus Trump. So Xixo's getting queued up again. If he loses this, he's gonna get benched. I mean, Dog did just dodge the bench by winning with his Freeze Mage prior to this, and if Xixo wins with his Shaman against the Patron Warrior, we have to assume from Trump, then you know, he'll dodge it as well. How favored do you think Patron Warrior or Shaman is in this matchup?
Well, this is kind of one of those newer matchups, especially it's a newer Shaman deck. It hasn't been tested as much. Monk would, talk about how there's not a big sample size for this.
Right.
I wish I had his statistics because I actually don't know too much about this matchup. I have to imagine the Shaman deck does okay against Warrior because it feels like if a new deck pops up and it's a good deck in the meta, surely it does well against Patron Warrior. Right.
Yeah,
Like,
I think Shaman is like 60-40 maybe. It's
definitely close.
Yeah, it's got to be like slightly favored maybe for the Shaman, but not by a massive margin. But it's nice to have at least.
Yeah, one of the actual important things is some Patron players been cutting Fiery Warax, cutting one of them. And it's a pretty big draw against Mech Warper decks, and they have been falling out of the meta, but as they come back, it's like, I think people are going to realize Fiery Warax is a pretty good card again.
Well, I wonder though, like with that new card coming out, the King's Defender, I know it's probably not going to replace the War Axe. I am fully aware of this, but I have hope that we'll see, especially with that bolster card, a taunt-oriented warrior crop up as an alternative to control and patron. I would just love to see something like it.
It looks like it is control. So we've
oh man,
I think we saw Trump play this once so far, if I'm not mistaken, in Archon League, and I'm not sure if it's really going to give him much of an edge in this matchup. Like, I feel like you might rather be the Patron Warrior here. Oh, wow.
I think so, by like maybe another 5% again in favor of the. So it's like 65-35 looking like 6-0 here. Wow.
Brawl might be important because it looks like 6-0's draw is just going to line up to be really minion heavy.
Yeah. Well, shield block. I was gonna
gonna
say shield block would be crazy too, but turns out he draws it right afterwards to combine with the shield slam.
So he's gonna save it. He could have just shield blocked, shield slammed this, and set up for a Deathbite the next turn, but I guess he realizes that would just be going into a Fireguard Destroyer most likely, so it wouldn't really get the job done. One important thing is Trump does have Harrison, and if that lines up into a Doomhammer, that's not game over, but it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, like Power Mace can dodge the massive drawback in the case where there is a mech. At least as a warrior, if you have the Harrison Jones, you can get initiative on trading into the mechs in order to avoid the Power Mace doing anything. But Doomhammer is what you're looking to steal there.
Wow, and 6-0 is actually going to go ahead and remove that Shredder entirely and set up another Neotron. I guess really fearing the Deathbite coming out on 4, which Trump did have, so in theory, I think the logic behind his play worked out here. I'm still not sure. I feel like developing a Fireguard Destroyer is pretty strong.
Yeah, I'd almost say it's the stronger play. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Cruel Taskmaster execute? That would be bad, but at the same time, the Neotron is going to be able to tank, one of the hits, and that's kind of forcing him to have another weapon to clean up the Neotron. And you've got the Shredder on the back end, so I like what you're saying.
Okay, well there's Lotheb, so that lines up a bit better into his mana curve. Next turn he can go for like Crackle and piloted Sky Golem, or piloted Shredder, or the Fireguard Destroyer. So it's an awkward turn for Trump, like very awkward. Would have been great if there was no Lotheb effect.
Yeah, but like he can still get a shield block double shield slam for the double whammy here on 2 minions that he wants to remove. Which could be very important.
Ooh, Taunt Totem is huge. Best totem in the game against Warrior.
That guy's totem is crazy.
I can't beat a totem like that. He needed exactly that one.
Oh man. Well, Dalexstrasza is also not that bad.
Yeah. It's going to help him stabilize later.
Right.
But
For the immediate sense, like in the immediate sense, it's not stellar, but it can help a little bit. Hopefully, if you kill the Shredder, there's not a 3-2 with Wind Fury that comes out of it. Alright.
Yeah. So despite the taunt totem, Trump's still in a pretty fine spot. That's a pretty nice pickup for 6-0. He can play that and the Fire Guard Destroyer this turn. Really start pushing damage, and he's got a little bit of burn in his hand.
Yeah, he's got to be liking that top deck. Unfortunately for him, it's going to backfire slightly because Trump can handle it very nicely. But
Yeah,
in other
he's
circumstances,
not going to get the death rattle. Worst place for the sword to go. It's a 50-50, but yeah, he's not going to get the death rattle, assuming Trump just swings before playing Harrison.
which we have to assume he's going to do. And what's nice for Trump as well is that the Harrison is played on the same turn. You can also armor up on the back end, so you get to weave in that extra health that's going to protect you against some of the burst later on. Very nicely on turn 7.
Yeah, he could even pick up. He does have both executes in his deck, and an execute would be just huge here.
Man, if he finds it off of the
Yeah.
Harrison Jones, it's only one draw, but at the same time, it's the draw that could just turn the game completely upside down.
Yeah. The 6-0 is still in a pretty okay spot. No.
Still not too bad. I mean,
Yeah.
you're forcing your opponent to have an extra lava burst. For each shield block you're playing, you're forcing him to have that. And oh my god,
Oh my.
what an insane draw from 6-0
Well, if there's
here.
ever a draw you want to draw after Harrison hits the board, this is it.
This is
I
an
re-
insane pickup for 6-0.
Yeah. And it's just going to be all face, and that's a lot of damage next turn. Trump does have a shield block to sustain a little bit. So there is potential he can make it to that Alex Strauza turn and survive.
And the healing totem too. I mean, it's getting the Fire Guard Destroyer out of range of Harrison Jones, killing it since it was damaged by 1.
Oh, he got
This
the
is
healing totem.
hell.
Yeah, I didn't even realize.
That is the worst. But Trump,
Oh,
even
no.
Trump can recognize the value in what 6-0's RNG gave him here. Like everybody
He
can.
might just be dead because of healing totem. Because if he could just trade into that Fire Destroyer, then 6 would have 13 to 16 damage, and Trump would be at 17.
Right.
So he'd be alive, and then he get Alex next turn. So everything would be okay. But like the healing totem adds 4. He needs to find a way to remove that Fire Guard Destroyer.
So Shaman's got a new totem, 2 mana, deal 4 damage to the opponent. That sounds super balanced, Shocky.
Yeah,
Super balanced.
it's pretty big here. I don't know what Trump can really do. I mean, you have to probably start with shield block.
I'd assume so, yeah. I mean, if only to get the extra
Oh,
health.
he's just
Maybe,
gonna rag.
and that's it. And he's gonna die no matter what happens here, but he's gonna be trying to 50-50, hoping Kixo's out of burst. But we know for a fact he's got, more than enough just in hand. Yeah.
Oh, do you act like you top decked him?
You
Oh no,
should.
you go for the crackle.
Wow. 6-0
Oh,
is...
he didn't go for any BM.
No, he did.
Oh,
he
cracked
actually
his own
crackled
face.
himself.
Okay. So for Trump, there's like that millisecond where you're like, oh, did he screw up? No.
Yeah. Oh wait, never mind. This is what's called giving hope to someone and then just crushing it all away. Xixo gonna pick up a win here with his shaman, so he's not gonna get benched. He's gonna dodge it the same way Dog did. That was a pretty cool match. Like some of the value from the Stone Claw and the Healing Totem was just out of this world.
6-0, a shaman master who's really learned how to summon the right totems.
Yeah.
To be fair, the taunt one would have been pretty good there too.
Right.
So it was more like a 50-50 than a 25%.
Oh, you're right.
And yeah,
Oh.
so I would say overall, though, I didn't see any mistakes from 6-0. I thought he held on to his burn spells at the correct time, which really, you have to realize that you can't really afford to remove too many minions. You just need to save Crackle for face and all that, and at the end he had way overkill, but...
Yeah, it was well played either way. I mean, he couldn't guarantee that he was going to find the Doomhammer that he wanted. So it turned out pretty well. Both players played, but when the cards line up, of course, at this level of play, very often it comes down to people piloting properly, which very often they do, and then the hands being exactly how you want them. Now, we'll be moving on to the next game very shortly. In the meantime, if you guys want to tweet anything, #ATLC, we'll show up the tweets on the stream. If you have any ideas about who's going to be playing what and who's going to play what and whom, it's going to be pretty nice. If you have predictions, feel free to share them. Is it just me or that dragon look a lot like Kibler on this image?
I mean, it is his dragon. Like, I don't know. I think it's just supposed to be Twilight Whelp, but
So let me get this straight. Kibler has pointy teeth. This is a Twilight Whelp. Twilight is a
Okay.
movie about vampires. Kibler is a vampire confirmed. Am I doing this right?
I think you're doing it right. Yeah.
All right, that's good. I just wanted to make sure. All right, so
Well,
Zalay.
speaking of Kibler, this is it. I mean, he could go 10-0.
Yeah,
This is the match to do it.
we have to
So
assume Zalay's playing Patron. I mean, he's been playing it
Yeah.
all the time. It's just it's a player, one of the few players that you just pin on archetypes, and like in the olden days, you could do that as well, where you would pin players on specific decks. But as time passed, they've had to diversify their ability
Yeah.
to play
It's-
multiple decks. So
It's
nowadays,
very outspoken about liking the Patron Warrior deck and how good
Right.
it is.
yeah.
I don't think it's too big of a deal. I mean, Trump did go ahead and try to get a little bit of a surprise factor, but also I think the Control Warrior pick lines up pretty well into everything Archon has left, like Rogue, probably Freeze Mage, Hunter, that might even be just Aggro Hunter. Like, the Control Warrior pick might end up being a pretty nice pick from Trump, not only just for a surprise factor, but because it might just be better.
Well, I'm not too sure what the players are waiting for to start the game, but it should be happening pretty soon. Well, Killer with Druid, like, how favored is Druid against Patron anyway? Like, is it just because of the excessive amount of bursts? Like, the Shades of Nax could actually matter quite a bit.
It's pretty close. Yeah, the Shades of Nashmiths are actually pretty key because not only do they represent so much damage, but if you get out 2, it really shuts down the possibility of your opponent just making a bunch of patrons and saying good game, like, because those Shades always threaten to just pick off a patron, and then you hear power 1 down and you wrath the 4th one, and it's like, okay, there go your patrons. Druid is... I know the opinions on this matchup have changed a lot, but the one thing that Druid definitively does is it's one of the few decks that can pressure Patron Warrior a lot to the point where they have to try to be the aggressor. And so you'll see a lot of players throw out Frothing Berserkers, throw out Grim Patrons, just try to get ahead on board against Druid, knowing Druid struggles to come back. But it is very close to 50-50.
All right, so it's all about basically they're both playing for the board, and you're trying to put the warrior in a position where he's going to have to overextend aggressively before he's ready to do so, and OTK you, and then you can pick off the win if anything.
Yep. So it will be kind of the warrior trying to force out the board, and the druid obviously, as always, will be looking for like innervate, wild growth, just looking to pressure really early and make the patron warrior make bad plays.
Time waits for no one.
All right, so
All right, that worked.
It's Monk.
good. Welcome back. Welcome back, Monk. You were gone for a while there. What happened to you? Did you get forgotten in the twisting nether?
Well, there were some Skype issues, but you know, this is we do live in the technology sphere, and we are on the base of technology. So once my screen gets loaded up, how's everyone doing so far? How is each team doing so far?
It's 2-2. So
Yeah, it's
we're
a
pretty
great.
tied up.
Great match so far. The series has been pretty good. I mean, the matches, like, some of the lineups were really favored in one or the other player's side, but it hasn't been a complete blowout so far in either of the games that we saw. Man, Monk, I missed you.
I miss me too sometimes.
Monk, we were lost without your statistics. We were like,
Yeah,
what
we
do
were
you
trying
think
to
of this
bring up
matchup?
stats. Yeah, it's like,
Oh, for-
Shocky, what do
I
you
don't
think of
know.
this? What does Monk
So-
think of this?
So for this matchup, it's going to be it's very debated upon, but most people consider this like around 50-50. Some
Oh,
patron
man.
warrior players consider
I
it like
nailed
above 50-50.
Yo, Shocky, like, you nailed that. That was like perfect analysis. You could be
Nice.
Monk
Yeah.
too.
I know, but like if you just want to go by stats, it's right now it's 47 to 37, so that's a 56% win rate.
Wow.
But the argument is always that like the druid is much easier to play compared to the patron warrior. So if you play it at an optimal level for both players, like some would argue that it's actually either 50-50 or slightly favored towards the patron.
Depending on who plays the deck. Yeah, I can see that.
Kibler did not draw Wild Growth or Innervate.
Good game.
Is this what it takes to end the 9-0 streak? Could this be it?
He's been doing very well, like, for Innervates and Wild Growth when he played it. I think he played it like 2 weeks straight, right? He played Druid, and he's gotten the ramp every time, if I recall.
Yeah, he definitely played it against us, and Drew, very fortunately. But I'm not sure if he played it a second time or not. I know he's played a lot of Mech Shaman and been pretty outspoken. I mean, his Mech Shaman starts weren't like auto wins. You know, he did have a lot of decision making. It was basically, you can look at those games and be like, Kibler made choices to win those games, so you can't really take much away from him. Once you start racking up, you know, like 9 wins in a row, it's like, how much can you really say is RNG at this point?
Yeah, especially against a field that's so stacked. I mean, it's kind of hard to start demeaning the accomplishments. So, what do you play in Kibler's position here? I mean, you kind of want to deal with that frauding, but at the same time, the Shredder is such a good play that it's hard to deny. If there's a weapon, then you run into issues. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of a tricky spot, I feel.
Well, I think you have to keep her the Acolyte to deny the draw, but now you're like, okay, please don't have Deathbite. Please don't have Deathbite.
Yeah, please no weapon.
Yeah, even if he has Deathbite, you can Harrison it, but then the Frothing
The
Berserker.
frothing is going to get
Yeah, it gets out of
nuts.
control.
Yep. That's pretty much the major issue here.
I guess you could Wrath it afterwards, though, in that position, right? Like, because it's going to go... Sure, it's going to go, like, completely out of control for 1 turn, perhaps. But then you could...
That's true.
Well, that's enough, right? I guess 1 turn's enough when you're playing Frothing, but...
Yeah, that's the major issue is if your opponent kind of runs away and you're playing on the defensive so much, when you really start to turn the game. Now, that can happen. There was actually, like, a crazy Patron versus Druid game between Kalinto and Life Coach earlier today at Gamescom. Where Life Coach went down to 1 health as the Druid player, and Kalinto ran out of every single card in his deck and couldn't finish him by 1 health. So the Druid can kind of take a defensive position and come out on top. It's pretty rare for that game, for this matchup to go that late.
Yeah. Well, we saw the Keeper. We still have a Wrath in Kibler's hand, so if there is, you know, some kind of funky Patron play next turn with the, you know, Grim Patron Inner Rage Whirlwind, Swipe being used... It's not really a big deal since you rarely want to use it, but without the Keeper, and you've only got a Wrath left, like, how will you handle this?
Well, Zalay does have the option to be a bit greedy and go for it now. He'd get punished by, like, get punished by Savage Roar Wrath would be able to clear, but then he'd get a free Emperor off. So I think that's what he's thinking here is worst case, he gets an empty board into an Emperor next turn, which is, you know, pretty nuts.
Oh, wow. Double Wrath
Wrath
for Kibler. That's a draw, Kibler. He recognizes it, just nods wildly at the
Kibler
camera.
nod.
Yeah, the Kibler nod, like, hey, that's a good card. I think that's a good card. Is it a good card, guys? I think it's a good card.
Well, the nice thing about this is now the Emperor can come down, and because like 1 swipe has been used and 2 Wraths been used, and Kibler doesn't have a board, then that Emperor will probably stay alive for the next turn.
Yeah, this is looking still pretty good for Zlay. I mean, at first I wasn't really liking the aggressive play, but once I considered, like, at worst, you just get to Emperor on an empty board next turn. Like, that's pretty nuts.
Yeah, so does Kibler have to... I mean, he's got the top deck and answer the Emperor right now. There's really nothing... Oh, wow. Is that it?
Well...
Does he do it?
He has Druid of the Claw and Hero Power to do it as well. He could also just Ancient a War, but that's really risky if your opponent has Execute. He would end up getting very punished for that. So,
well, I think you're right. Like the play
it is like the winning kind of line though. Like you can't assume your opponent has everything. You can't keep defending. You have to turn this game around at some point. So that's why I think that this is a pretty justifiable play.
I mean, that Execute is going to be devastating.
Yeah, he can draw 5 cards this turn with Acolyte and Battle Rage, and get rid of the Ancient War for free.
Yeah,
I'm
that
very
sounds
surprised.
absolutely
Yeah,
insane.
that
It's
has
just
to be the play.
ridiculous.
It spends 3 mana to do that.
And then
3
he's got
mana,
4
draw
left
5.
over, because, you know, why not?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like he's going to get so much value off of all this and be so ahead on board. It's going to be ridiculous.
People hail Grim Patron and Frothing Berserkers as the win conditions in that deck. I think it's almost Emperor Warrior sometimes, because that card alone can win you, like, most of the matches where you find it, I think you'll pull out ahead, like, vastly more than if you didn't. Like, the win percentages between finding it and not finding it, I think must be disgustingly high.
Yeah, and I think Kibler figured he was fishing for the execute, but it turns out Zilly just had it, so it was pretty calculated by Zilly. This worked out really well. I didn't really see a different play than this, and it's going to put him in a really dominant position to be the first person to take down Kibler.
So what do you do if you're the first person who takes down Kibler? Like, what happens? Do you get something like the defeater of the Master of Duels? Like, do you get a special title?
I don't know.
If there's only one loss on Kibler's record, though, like, that could be crazy as well. Like, so, like, could say, I'm the only guy who beat him. It's all on you guys. I did
So,
nothing.
all skill, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
I denied him that wild growth draw.
I got the right totems. I denied him the wild growth. We're a good
Easy
team.
game.
Yeah.
Well, for Kibler here, there's really not much going. You can't really mount an offense when your opponent's a warrior at 31 health. You can't really... You can clear this board with, like, Force of Nature here. Clear off 2 of the minions, and...
That's the only option I think that's gonna maybe bring him anywhere near victory.
I think he's relegated to a defensive plan here, and the problem with that is if the Patron Warrior draws infinite cards, eventually they'll kill you.
I mean, the one Frothing's out, there's one patron left. So I guess at this point you're worried about the second patron and the second Frothing. Those are the 2 big threats. The weapons also do add up quite a bit of damage, but they're not what you're most worried about at this point. It's just that even if you do get a good board, if the opponent has another execute, you're also out of it. Like, it doesn't take long for you to just get thrown out of the game.
Yeah, Zilly didn't have to use much stuff inefficiently this turn. Like, an execute hit a 7-mana taunt for 0 mana. He drew 5 cards on that same turn. It's like, it's just not what it needs to be for Kibler here. He would need Kibler to throw out cards more inefficiently. This is a little inefficient, but the fact that Kibler doesn't have a way to clear hit makes it a fine play. Like, I think that's what Zilly's thinking here, is he has both War Songs, he might as well start pushing damage, and Kibler probably can't respond.
Kibler is smiling. I'm not sure if he's smiling at the ridiculousness of the fact that you can pay 2 mana to draw a 10th of your deck. Or if he's smiling at the fact that his opponent has a second Frothing. I'm not sure.
This is the end.
My winning
This is the
streak.
end for me.
It's still the end. But
Yeah.
it was a...
Yeah.
Where shall I strike?
Yeah. I don't know. Hey, Kibler's got to feel a little uneasy about the outcome of this, but then again, you know, no ramp. That's going to put you in a position that's just awful to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, again, from his point of view, like, if you want to look at things from, like, the positive side, he's not playing the best decks, right? Like, he's not the guy playing Patron. He had to take Druid for his team this week. It's not the greatest deck in the game, and you have to expect to lose a bit. 9-1 is still an insane record.
Yeah, considering the decks he's been playing, which were initially considered all underdogs pretty much, and he's been doing very well with them all. You know, there's no shame in losing here against Patron as a Druid player. Especially when we said, you know, it's kind of a coin flip, depending on whom you ask, so...
And the series isn't over yet. I mean, they did fall behind here, but it's not completely out of it. They do really need to find that Druid win, and I was just kind of thinking about it. There is a little bit of merit to, like, if you're not in a great spot, maybe you just don't have Kibler play to kind of hold on to his record.
Yeah.
You know, throw
that
him
would
a
have
bone
been,
there.
like, you guarantee the fact that he's going to be free, like, queuing up against Freeze Mage, right? Like, you try to bait him with that. You're like, you know, you can play Druid and Shaman, and we'll give you all those classes, but you also get to get the good matchups. We'll win them for you.
Well, that being said, I think Kibler has some decent matchups going into the next few matches. He probably has like the freeze mage from Firebat, although like I wouldn't put it past Firebat to just switch it up yet again to either tempo or mech mage. And he has the hunter, which is like kind of 50-50, although a lot of people would argue for the hunter. And then you have the rogue, which, but just according to stats, is favored towards the druid.
All right. Well, it's one of those things where initially a lot of people were saying, Druid wins, then people said, well, Rogue isn't that bad either. And then it got turned back to where it was initially, where people started saying, well, yeah, Druid does have the edge there because they're the ones putting the pressure on. So unless the Rogue gets a crazy file teacher board, it's pretty hard for her to establish, any threats, really.
Yeah. Well, Druid versus Rogue is kind of similar to Druid versus Patron in that like stats show that it's favored towards Druid. But all the specialists like would tell you that it's favored towards like the specialist class.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of merit to that. I know certain pro players, a lot of pro players, you have to kind of be confident in your ability. You have to be like, the math lies. I'm just better.
Exactly.
That's basically what they're saying. Like, I know that 6-0 specifically probably thinks he's favored in both of those matchups. And if you bring up the stats to him, he'll be like, yeah, but that considers everyone. Like,
yeah,
I'm better than everyone.
my microcosm is different. What reminds me a bit of Kit Kats, back when we used to play Control Warrior. He basically said my deck has like a 60% win rate against the entire field. Like it doesn't matter who I'm going to be playing against. I win about 60% of the time. So overall, the deck, Control Warrior is just the best. And if you gave Control Warrior to another player, then he wouldn't perform nearly as well. So then the statistics were in fact a little skewed.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I mean, you have to keep it in perspective. I actually asked Sixo, what matchup is Patron Warrior unfavored against? And he had to think about it for a while, and then he told me maybe Echo Mage, but that's it.
He does think it's favored against Handlock, which is I still disagree with.
Right.
Right. Like it pretty obviously looks to not be favored against Handlock. Handlock has a very strong win percentage, and I mean, if you face a player as strong as yourself, I feel like you can't really put yourself at that much of an edge, especially to the point where you're like, no, I don't care what the stats say. Never tell me the odds.
Yeah, you're right.
I think Sixo is like willing to like pretty much like money match anyone in like a best of 11 or whatever in that matchup, which everyone says is unfavored.
No, so Sixo says he would play me 25 times aggro paladin against Warrior, Patron Warrior, and if I won 6, I would win the money. So he thinks he would go. Or? Yeah, he thinks he could go 20-5 at worst against aggro paladin.
That makes no sense. I don't believe that at all. Yeah, this is so insane.
We're gonna do that someday. We're gonna
do it, Shoggy. Report back with the results. We can even try to make a show match of it online.
I mean, you only have like 2 weeks, right, to do it before the new change comes out.
Well, we can always play with the old list. Like, you don't have to be the meta, unless something gets nerfed.
That is so poetic. I'm gonna note that down. You don't have to be the meta. This is so good. This
Chalky 2050.
All right, so onwards to the next game very soon. Zalay versus Trump. We've got Hunter from Zalay versus Trump's Warrior. So Zalay's looking to lock down the second game in a row to make sure that all his decks are covered. I mean, he did just win with his good Patron Warrior. So we'll see if he can get another game right away against the Control Warrior from Trump.
Yeah, it's not really what you'd be looking for. I mean, he could be running more of a late game Hunter. I believe they actually have run a more mid-rangey Hunter every time, so that's pretty fine against Warrior, maybe even favored, but if he is running that aggressive Warrior, or the aggressive Hunter, rather, Control Warrior, not really what you want to match up into.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that, just based on the stats, it actually paints a different picture if you look at the cold hard numbers. According to the stats...
hard numbers, all right.
Cold hard numbers,
okay,
right.
give it to us.
Let's start it up. So Control Warrior is 14-12 against Space Hunter, which is like a lot more even than you expect. It's like 53%, and against all other types of Hunter, mid-range and hybrid, it's around 62%. So it's like...
Now, Monk, we talked about skewing stats. I would say I skew that Face Hunter stat a bit because I'm so good.
All right, Chalky. But I think like what to take from it is whoa.
Whoa, let's all interrupt what we were doing. Public announcement here. There's a snipe detected in Zele's hand.
Sniperino.
Okay, so this card has been used by both Zele and Purple Drank in the Hearthstone Pro League by PvP Live, and basically what they're trying to do is like in that format you can basically snipe people or like snipe people in the sense that like you can put specific cards in your deck to counter what you expect your opponents to bring. And both of these players, they brought it against Sho, who they expected to play. They expected Sho to bring Patron Warrior and mid-range or hybrid hunter. So this seems to be a tech against specifically those classes. And because Trump is not bringing Patron and instead he's bringing Control, it's probably not as good of a card.
Yeah, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And interestingly enough, you know, it's one of those cards that even against Rogue does fairly okay, because you kill the 3/3s, you kill the Azure Drakes, and you take them by surprise. And even if you lower the Violet Teacher down to 1, that's a really easy Knife Juggler Unleash coming up a little later. So there's a lot of merit to that card, even though it's, you know, obviously not one of the top played secrets in Hunter.
So do you guys think Trump's going to play around Snipe this game?
I think we'll see a very interesting reaction from Trump when
There is I mean, it's pretty likely to hit like a Shredder, but I mean, it's really not that amazing against Control Warrior. You said, you know, it's mostly for Patron Warrior.
So the trap he got here was not Snipe. You know, this other one's lighting green, so we know that for a fact.
Probably freezing,
Yeah.
which is much more expected. Now, the other thing, though, is he might only have those 2 traps in his deck, so playing this Mad Scientist, the second one, maybe not too good.
Yeah,
But
you want to
the-
play it for the body, but really not so much.
the alternative, I guess, is just playing a snipe on the field.
You just snipe him.
Snipe the
What's he
Acolyte.
gonna do?
Yeah, snipe the Acolyte of Pain. That's what you do here.
It'd probably hit a Cruel Taskmaster. Trump could just... What he's thinking is like, okay, I'll take the freezing trap with my Cruel Task. Oh no, he's not gonna play it. So he will fall victim to Snipe.
But what if Millhouse Maelstrom comes out? Then that's a good value.
So can Trump make any reads off the fact that a secret was played and then Mad Scientist was played?
Yeah, you pretty much
Snake,
assume it's yeah. You can assume Snake, and you can also assume, okay, he only has 2 secrets in his deck. So yeah, there is some world where Trump doesn't attack into this Mad Scientist, and there's another world where before he does, he plays Piloted Shredder, gets sniped, he kills the Scientist, and a second snipe gets pulled out of the deck.
Oh, what a world that would be.
Oh man, I
One
want
day
to
it'll
live in that
happen.
world.
Just wait for the lock and load Hunter. It's happening. Double snipe.
New meta.
Well, you don't have to be meta.
Thank you, Noxious,
Today I learned.
for the reminder.
But it's a good quote, though. It's amazing.
It's like, can we get like Shia LaBeouf on a green screen saying that? And
Trump. Whoa.
oh, there it is. There's the reaction.
Oh, man. Oh, whoa. What a pickup.
Well, not
No,
actually that great.
He was so distraught because if he had seen what he did was he played the
End
Shredder
turn,
and hit
yeah.
in turn. If he saw the snipe, I think he would have hit the minion with his axe to protect his
Right.
3/2.
All day, every day, of course.
Yeah,
So-
when this happened to Show in the PvP live, like I believe he like a charger dropped out of the Shredder and he just like forgot to charge with it basically because he hit
Yeah.
end turn right after he played the minion.
Yeah, like everybody does. So this is proof that even when you discount a card, it might just crop up in a deck or another,
Well-
especially in a card like Snipe, which isn't really like that polarized value-wise. It's not Wisp, right? Like it's not completely
Yeah.
horrible. It's halfway to viability.
I don't know if you guys have played against Snipe, but the animation is obnoxiously like long. You have to
Right.
wait like 4 seconds after you play your minion for it to finally be like, by the way, get sniped.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like Patron. I actually rage quit against Patron sometimes. I'm like Alt F4. I know I'm dead. I don't want to go through this.
Oh, this is a bad hand from
Right.
Trump.
Which hand? Oh, this hand.
That
Oh.
that one
there we
with
go.
all of the top end. Well, he was hoping that dropped a 1 health minion.
Unfortunately, that's not the case. And actually, the hunters he gets to get the initiative here. So
Well, he
Not a
has the
bad one.
initiative, but this seems to be more of a defensive hunter with a Sludge Belcher, so it's not necessarily as good as if he had like a Loatheb on this turn, for instance.
Yeah, you'd rather have a more aggressive minion when you're this far ahead.
yeah, you're not capitalizing enough on the fact that you get to dictate what gets played and when. So
Although, most lists these days, they don't have Sludge Belchers, so it's definitely a conscious choice to put that card in. It may have to do something with the fact that Purple Drank did really well with a Sludge Belcher based mid-range hunter back in the day, like 2 months ago.
he was very popular. I think Belcher was. I would almost want to say it almost became a staple to the point where you couldn't see a hunter deck without Sludge Belcher for a while, and somehow it just phased out.
I don't really like this kill command too much. I mean, he has the freezing trap out. Freezing a shield maid is not the greatest thing, but you're pushing so much damage that I think I would have liked to just save that 5 damage kill command.
But you're kind of dealing 5 by not allowing him to replay Shield Maiden, right?
Yeah, but it cost 8 to replay shield maid, and it's such a hard
Simple
card to
loss,
really
yeah.
fit in.
I have no time for games.
Well, if Shield Maiden had actually procced the freezing trap, I think Trump might have been in a worse position here, because now, even though he has Sylvanas on board, like
He would
he's
almost
not-
be dead, if not dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
Although-
Yeah, you're actually right. You're totally
Yeah,
right.
there's. If he
Is a-
did like just hero power, he could actually maybe have lethal. He wouldn't with the Misha roll, but
Yeah. But the question is Alay afraid of Brawl at this point, and can you play around Brawl?
no, you can't play around Brawl at all. You're never trading into this Sylvanas. You're never kill commanding it. Maybe you hold back on the Houndmaster and just hero power because you're already setting up for lethal so much next turn anyway. That's the only thing I could possibly see him doing is just hero powering, overplaying a minion.
I'll see what he does. It looks like he's just going to push face. Obviously, trading makes no sense when you've got a freezing trap set up. So weave in a little bit more damage with the hero power and see if you can set up for lethal. I think if Trump doesn't pick up the brawl, that's just over.
Yeah, I don't see anything he can do here. Is he dead to board? He could kill off the Misha. So then there would be 10, 12, yep, that would be it. So
What is insane is to think that if the mad scientist had died, not summoned the second freezing trap, and the 3-2 had lived, he would have triggered the freezing trap, not putting him in an awkward spot as bad as this one.
well, no, this is the first freezing trap still. Those
Yeah,
scientists
exactly.
didn't grab anything.
Well,
exactly,
if,
that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
is-
basically, if Trump had seen the
Yeah,
snipe
yeah.
and then attacked into that scientist, it could have been a completely different game.
Oh man, did Snipe win the game? Can we agree that Snipe won the game?
I will
Snipe
agree with you.
bamboozled Trump.
Okay, Snipe bamboozled Trump. That's good. That's good enough.
It seems like in Archon League, every single week, Trump has had some crazy thing happen to him and he's reacted. Like,
Yeah.
he had the turn against Life Coach. Against me, he attacked a 9-3 Frothing Berserker into a freezing trap, thinking
Right.
it was explosive, and then he was just so taken aback, and then I won the next turn. Here he got sniped. Bad things happen to Trump in this league, man. That one week he went 1 and 6.
No, 0-4. Yeah, 1 and 6. You're right. Exactly.
And it was
Yeah.
it was it was 1 and 6. I think it was 1 and 5 actually. I think
No, he
someone
lost
else
to
No,
a
he
lost.
Warrior
lost
and
every
4 with
single
Gravity.
game.
Oh,
Because his teammates both went 2 and 0.
okay. And then he lost all of his games with mid-range Paladin. Pretty much, he lost 2 games with
He
Patron.
did
I
not
think.
win with that. Yeah, he did
Yeah.
not win with mid-range Paladin.
Well, that was pretty unlucky for Trump there. I mean, again, we spoke about this earlier, but the surprise factor in this league, when you seal, you bring a deck that's kind of different from the usual archetypes that are expected, and you seal the game with it. You don't have to, try to push it and force it. In the case of Trump, bringing Control Warrior, although it's not completely out of this world as far as bringing an archetype to a tournament, it's still somewhat unexpected, and now his opponents are playing with that knowledge. I think the Control Warrior right now would be pretty okay to line up. I think it would be something to play, maybe.
I don't think it's a bad choice to bring Control Warrior, actually. It lines up against Freeze Mage and Rogue and Patron Warrior, possibly, which are 3 decks you pretty much know your opponents are going to bring based on what they've brought before. And you've also know that Archon, like, they don't tend to bring Druid every single time. So that's yet another matchup that's that's good for the Druid, but it's thrown out the window.
Yeah. Well, guys, if you want to comment on anything that's been happening so far, you can do so by tweeting hashtag ATLC, followed by your comment, of course, if you want to congratulate, Kibler on his performance. Sadly, ending the winning streak, but he's still doing pretty well here. He's got one more win to grab with his Druid before he can say that his day's done. But, I mean, this could be difficult either way. I mean, there's 4 decks left for Value Town to push through, and Freeze Mage and Rogue are usually going to be able to pull off at least one of those, right? Like, pick off at least one of those each.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Monk said, the Control Warrior lines up really well into these last 2 decks. The Druid has a 50-50 shot of hitting Freeze Mage, and Rogue's not too bad either. Rogue, I guess, kind of you really want to get the mirror match if you're dog. And maybe Trump's Warlock deck could end up being the weak link here. Regardless, Value Town has a lot of ground to cover with their 2 wins down, but
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. So we see that Mage from Firebat, obviously, versus the Control Warrior. So basically, guys, this is a case of Firebat often just escape conceding sometime in the mid game. He does that a lot, right?
I don't know if he'll do that here because you do have teammates that if your teammates don't want you to, you kind of you're obliged to play it out, right?
Right, of course.
Well, I've seen Firebat also concede on turn 1 when queuing up this matchup.
Well, he kind of just looks at his opening hand and he's like, okay, Emperor's not there, Archmage isn't there. You got me.
Him do that a lot. It's
he could be a different mage. I mean, there's small chance. I think Freeze Mage is incredibly good in this format, though. So. Yeah, it's Freeze Mage. But there is a chance. This matchup has gotten significantly better since Emperor Thorson came out.
Right.
For the Freeze Mage, it's no longer like 90-10, 95-5. It's more like a 20% chance for the Freeze Mage. And the big keys are getting a really nice Emperor into a really nice Archmage Antonidas. And for the Warrior, you can no longer sit back and armor up forever because there is a theoretical infinite damage possibility. So you do have to present some threats, which isn't a big deal for Control Warrior to do. They play a lot of threats.
And they have time to establish them too, which is, I think, what the biggest upside is they don't have to rush into playing those threats, because the Freeze Mage is not going to burst them down anytime soon. So they can just wait, find those 8 drops, 9 drops, back to back.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Like Chalky said, it's pretty much an 80-20 matchup. The stats say it's 12-3. But I believe most of those Freeze Mage wins came from Sea Story Cup when Blackrock Mountain was first released. Remember the infamous Ignite versus Amaz game where Amaz just ran out of cards as the Control Warrior and he just lost because he couldn't deal with Alex Strauss and Archmage Antonidas.
Yeah, one big thing actually is if there is just no execute and no shield slam, there is a chance you actually stick a threat and win the game off that.
Yeah, because they don't remove the 8/8 and suddenly you're able to get one attack and remove the bulk of armor and suddenly you can actually get it done.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to be a problem in this game just because Trump has the
Trump has so much cycle, yeah.
Yeah.
Armor made to fit.
I was hoping for Marinity here.
Well, he did kind of throw out the Armor Smith a little early. Now, you don't have as many Whirlwind effects to abuse it as a Control Warrior, but it is still one of those things where he's not going to get near as much armor out of it as he could.
Yeah. Well, actually, Firebat got pretty much one of the best hands you could have gotten. He had the Loot Hoarder, the Mad Scientist, and now an Acolyte. You can't ask for too much more except maybe an Emperor here.
Yeah. If he drew in these next 2 draws like Emperor and Archmage, that'd be pretty well set up to just go for it. That's pretty unlikely, but...
he does have more draw. I mean, an Arcane Intellect could also help quite a bit.
Yeah, he's not under much threat, which is nice. Unless Trump starts developing Ragnaros, Dr. Boom, maybe even just Shield Maidens in the upcoming turns, then he actually hasn't gained much armor. He hasn't put out much threat, and like Monk said, he's cycled a lot. So,
Well,
They're looking
Firebat,
okay.
Firebat goes and removes the Armor Smith right away instead of keeping it for potential, as you mentioned earlier, an Archmage Antonidas turn.
Yeah, well, here's the first like really interesting card in the game, and that's actually the second loot hoarder. These days, like you pretty much, like 90% of people only play one loot hoarder, and the second loot hoarder is like cut for something like the anti-kill bot or the or maybe like sometimes even a Kona Cold, sometimes even Malagos. So if he's running two loot hoarders, I feel like that's probably good for this matchup because he wants to cycle more. But it's also less of a chance that he has Malagos, which could help him in this matchup.
Yeah, and he has Pyroblast, so I'd say that's like all of your flex spots locked up. The Pyroblast, the second loot hoarder. I wouldn't be surprised to just see no heal bot from him at this point.
If you didn't expect any matchup where he'd need it, which I'd almost say, like, if you look at Value Town's past performances, you think you don't really need it that much. So I could understand why he's not running it.
Yeah, and let's say Trump wins this.
Monk went MIA again. Well, can we try to finish what he said? Oh, Ragnaros gets picked up.
Yeah,
That's a sick card against...
no second Flame Strike, for example. In future games.
Okay, so we didn't quite hear what you said. You kind of lagged out there for a second, Monk. Would you care to say that again?
Yeah, I was gonna say that because we've seen the second loot hoarder and the Pyroblast, if Firebat wins this game, or rather if Trump wins this game in like the first 15 turns or so, now Team Value Town knows that you probably don't have to play around a Malagos or a Flame Strike, or the second Flame Strike rather.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
I'd be less likely to play around Healbot as well now. One thing is Firebat probably won't really get to a point, if he loses this game, where he'll even play Pyroblast.
Yeah, I mean, there's Grom and Cruel Task. The Rag is set up, so, good luck removing that in any meaningful way.
Here starts the pressure, and without, like, Blood Mage Fireball Ping, there really isn't an efficient way in the Freeze Mage deck to remove Ragnaros.
This is one of those like situations where you can imagine Firebat saying, "I've literally never won in this position before."
Yeah, escape concede.
Yeah. Well, again, I think maybe the main reason he isn't conceding is you do have a team relying on you, so it's...
Of course.
You want to make sure you're not throwing any chance away.
I think he's the only player that I've seen do it as much as he has, though. Like, it's one of the traits that almost defines him as a player. He just looks at the board state, he's like, there's no way I'm coming back from this. I don't want to go through the motions. I am out. See you guys later.
To be fair, I think looking at the hands now, it's in a pretty bad spot. Trump has a lot of the armor gain to make sure he doesn't get burned out, which, I mean, Firebat doesn't even have the burn cards at the moment, but past that, he has the Gromish Taskmaster, even double Taskmaster, to make sure he has enough damage to pop the block pretty soon, and it's going to get rough.
The Shield Maiden, the Shield Block. I mean, his effective health is in the 50s if he really decides to go for it.
And his Emperor survived. So
yeah, why not? A little bit of a cheaper deal on that Sludge Belcher.
And he has the Shield Slam to kind of cover his bases, make sure he can remove the Alex, make sure he can remove the Antonidas. It's pretty much just kind of Trump playing out his cards in the right order from this point on, and we'll have to see if Firebat sees those cards and decides to concede, but...
Yeah, well, Firebat might be thinking he's taking a long time, so he might actually not have like the greatest hand, but this is probably the greatest hand.
Trump actually has the greatest hand.
Yeah, there's no way this is not winning the game.
He's gonna gain 12 armor this turn and reduce another 8 cards.
I can't always tell what Firebat's thinking is the worst part. It's like he doesn't really give too much away. I can always get there's like a sense of boredom, and
he's gonna go for Archmage this turn, and I guess not. I would have liked to see him just Archmage Frost Nova and say, okay, I'm conceding if you have Shield Slam. Okay, he's gonna do it next turn. He's gonna do it next turn.
Mm-hmm.
So
this might bait out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, never mind. That does it.
Okay.
Even if he just uses the Shield Slam here, maybe Trump is thinking like he has to save the Shield Slam and the Execute in order to deal with back-to-back Alex Straza and Archmage Antonidas.
Trump does not want to lose this game, that's for sure. That
Well,
would
it's
be
one of the good
embarrassing.
lineups though for him. Like what's really cool about this is that for Trump, from Trump's perspective, running into Rogue isn't that bad, but running into Freeze Mage is the dream. So that's going to allow him to log down that Control Warrior.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely one of the reasons you'd bring Control Warrior. Patron Warrior is still really good against it, but it is, I would say, slightly worse against Freeze Mage.
I think it's harder because unless you're running a list that runs, double shield block, it's a little tougher to stack that extra bit of armor that sometimes gets you past the point of no return.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the
to be
biggest
fair,
deal... Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't even think double shield block is like that amazing in Patron Warrior against Freeze Mage, simply because like you go to fatigue so much and the extra cycling sometimes doesn't actually help. Whereas in Control Warrior, you almost never go to fatigue with shield blocks.
Yeah, the biggest deal, I think, is cards like Shield Maiden, which give you extra health and present a threat and don't cycle you. And also the fact that Control Warrior plays much better threats. Like Dr. Boom and Ragnaros do a much better job of pressuring your opponent than just War Song Commander, Patron. Stuff that just gets removed by Flame Strike, by Blizzard, like... You don't have as much ways to pressure them, whereas like this game we saw Trump just coined out Ragnaros, that did 16 and forced Firebat to fireball it.
So here's an interesting spot. Trump used the execute the previous turn, and now he might be baited into using the shield slam. So that actually gives Archmage Antidotus like some opportunity to deal some
Yeah, but he's out of Frost Novas now.
he has one left, right?
No, he used both. He just went back-to-back Frost Nova Doomsayer.
Okay. Is the hand delayed here that we're seeing?
Oh yeah, he used Blizzard. Okay.
You're right, he did use Blizzard. Never mind.
Okay, my bad.
Shocky, what's up with that?
So, I mean, there's gonna be a brawl. He does have Sylvanas Brawl to hedge his bets, so...
Okay,
Yeah.
so in the game that Amaz lost to Ignite in Sea Story Cup, Amaz actually had to lose a brawl where Archmage Antidotus survived.
Well,
So
there's a Sylvanas, though, so...
Yeah, that will change.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, Firebat just hovered over his cards. 5 left. I don't think he has time.
What to
Like
do,
even if he got
to do.
the fireballs, Trump can set him to 1 at any time now with the Grom Taskmaster combo, and then as soon as he hits fatigue, he's dead.
That's right, assuming he has no heal bot in his deck.
And he doesn't even have enough burn, I don't think, to end this game. Like Trump's going to kill this Archmage. He can do it in any way he wants. He's got the Grom. He's got the Task. He has Sylvanas Brawl. He has an
He got the
Execute.
Execute.
Like, yeah, I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised to see a concede.
Well, as you said, he's going to be playing for his team, so he's going to stick it until the end. But it's just one of those situations where going into the matchup, you already have apprehensions because it's just so horrible. And it's not as though Firebat is a newcomer either way. He's seen his fair share of that specific matchup. He used to be one of the most common for a while, like at high-level metagames before the metagame shifted away from Nax. Like you could see a lot of those. Even before Nax Ralmus, it was seen a bit. And it would just go on and on forever.
So he's seen both Doomsayers, so there's really not a risk of a Doomsayer wiping this board and making a miracle comeback happen.
Yeah, like...
I think even without the Execute, this play would be okay. Because again,
how do you get OTK'd, right?
with 50-something health, like, you can't lose within 3 turns.
The only way you lose is if you don't have Execute, is if the opponent has literally, 2 Sorcerer Apprentice and a discounted Echo of Medivh. One of the Sorcerer's Apprentices, was discounted, and then you just play Infinite Fireball. But that's not happening in Freeze Mage. Ever.
Yep, so... Not even close to what Firebat needed to pull out that matchup.
Yep, not at all. Well, it's he still has pretty okay matchups going forward. It's far from done for him. It's not as though Freeze Mage is a dead deck. If only because Trump might be playing Handlock. It's still not bad over there.
Yeah. Well, the issue is, I think if you know your opponents are going to be playing Freeze Mage, I've seen a lot of lists in Archon League. They add in Lothebs and Ragnaroses almost randomly, and it's because they want to counter that Freeze Mage. And Lotheb, like, not only is Lotheb good against Freeze Mage, it's good against Rogue, which is also in a lot of Archon League
Lineups, yeah. You
Where-
bring up
where,
a good
like,
point.
where you wouldn't put Lotheb as much in a standard like best of 5 conquest format, for example.
Lotheb's actually really powerful against Patron Warrior as well. It almost always gets in its damage. So like in my hunter list and in a lot of other hunter lists people are making nowadays, Lotheb's just included basically regardless of what hunter variant you run.
Yeah, well, I remember initially when people used, like, when the patron got developed, people didn't really think Lotheb was good against it, but it prevents so many, mid-game draw. They start cycling about 2, 3, 4 cards sometimes at that point of the game, and you just get a body on the board that's going to stick, and they have to answer it over 2 turns, which gives you back the initiative. So it's a really big swing card in and of itself, if only because it slows down the warrior from drawing his deck. Well, looks like we've got Rogue on either side.
Yeah, Freeze Mage is very strong, but it is kind of in a position now where it doesn't have amazing matchups. If Trump is Handlock, as he usually is, Handlock and Druid do pretty fine. Rogue's obviously fine for Firebat to face, and like you said, the Rogues is pretty much just a toss-up as far as who's really gets a win in first. I would say Sixos is better positioned, because he has 3 okay matchups, whereas Dog has a 50-50 chance of hitting Freeze Mage.
Yeah, Kibler has okay, like, the Druid from Kibler lines up pretty well against both the Mage and the Rogue, so he's not quite out of it. If he wants to be throwing himself here, I think that would be a good time now, because both the decks that are left could give you a win. And if you're playing for those tiebreakers, it might be a good opportunity.
Yeah. Another thing to consider is if Firebat loses twice, then he's locked out, so then your next match is going to be against Sixo. So that's something that Archon might be considering as well.
Well, knowing that they might play around the bench, what would you queue into Rogue? I mean, obviously not the Rogue for 50-50 unless the other 2 matchups are poorly favored. Would you play Handlock or Druid into the Rogue?
Well, I think the bench doesn't matter at all once you're down to 2 decks.
Yeah.
In theory, it does. If you think about it, like, okay, if Firebat loses this, he's benched. But if you think about the other scenario where he doesn't play this match, then he's technically benched as well. So it's a 50-50 either way, like whether they play Mage or Rogue. So just kind of like a coin flip scenario. Like you said, I think from Value Town's point of view, they are mostly going for tiebreakers. Your match differential does matter, especially with the league being as close as it is. There's tons of 2-2 teams where teams are separated by a game or 2 differential.
Yeah, it's a tiny margin, which doesn't amount... Like, it might amount to a little bit once we're done, but with the first phase, the first 7 teams moving on, means that you have a little bit of leeway.
Yeah, and this is going to be a huge matchup for Trump here. Really needs to pick up a win against this Freeze Mage, or else Kibler's chances of winning with Druid go down significantly, and the odds that Value Town would be able to pick up 3 in a row pretty low.
Yeah, it's also a very tough matchup sometimes for the Warlock player.
The interesting thing is that even though Archon might win this match, if Kibler just doesn't play for the rest of the match, he's going to still have like a 9-1 record.
Yeah. You do have to... Now, it is interesting. I think the team tiebreakers are more important than the Master of Duels, kind of like going for that. So if they did value Druid as like their best choice, I think they'd still go with it. Plus, there's always the chance he just wins and goes to 10-1. But you do have to be the Master of Duels, your team has to advance to the live final, so you have to be in the top 4 teams of the league.
So is this a turn? I mean, I guess you have the options here. With the Mountain, Twilight. Mountain, you assume is going to die. If anything, you're kind of throwing it out there if there's a Fireball. But you can still have decent follow-up pressure with the Double Drake.
I think there's merit here for Firebat to not remove it and just keep going face.
Bring his opponent down? Okay.
Yeah, it's a really dangerous game as the Handlock when your opponent gets to chip you down to around 15 health without even needing to Alex you just because they got the early minions. And there's that point where it's like, okay, I'm at 15. Am I dead? Do I need to heal bot? You heal bot and then they Alex you and you're like, maybe I shouldn't have heal botted? Like, I don't know. It's a point where like Firebat's forcing Trump to do something and he's sitting pretty at 30, so...
I really like that point you brought up because it forces the handlock player to use his heal bot early in fear of the Frostbolt Ice Lands that might come out of nowhere, and then the Alex hits. So you're kind of making your opponent make a mistake, basically.
Yep.
I kind of like it. It's like feels more like a chess move than anything else.
If you're afraid of these minions, like, and you want to Hellfire them, that puts you down to 16,
Yeah.
and it gives your opponent so many cards. An alternative would be to something like Ancient Watcher into Sun Fury Protector, and but that feels a little too defensive.
So Trump is going to respond with aggression as well. This is like you said, it's almost like chess. You don't want to make the first defensive move. You just really want to keep pressuring and force your opponent to be the first person to kind of falter and go for something defensive. So, yep, it's going to be more pressure from Firebat. It's down to 15, and that is one of those health values where as Firebat gets to higher mana totals, Trump has to be afraid. Like, he could die.
And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Healbot very soon, as you mentioned, right? Like, as a result of the amount of damage that's been dealt, like 15 is kind of a tipping point when you're playing against Freeze Mage, because you know that double Fireball, Frostbolt kills you over a few turns. Frostbolt, Ice Lance, plus a little follow-up Frostbolt will also kill you. It's really dangerous.
So he's finally going to taunt up to stop these minions from getting chip and damage. So it's like a mix of an aggressive and a defensive play. He still is at 15, so he has to be a little afraid. But now it's at a point where, because Trump has been so aggressive, now Firebat feels bad about Emperoring here. Like, can you really Emperor? I mean, you're staring down 18, so you'd have to, at the very least, trade in your Scientist to get a secret.
But if you trade everything in, then at least you're getting 2 extra cards for the Emperor, so you could find lethal off of it. I think it ultimately depends on what secret comes out. But it could still be fine to go for the Scientist either way. Because, I mean, even if it's Ice Barrier, it's still fine. Oh, it's Ice Block. That's even better for him.
Yeah, he's got the double Ice Block lined up, so he could start going for a very aggressive, like you said, trade in both Acolytes, get the Emperor off, and just do it. But the Blizzard is really safe here. It does make sure that Ice Block lives at least another turn.
So it's acting as another Ice Block, basically.
Yeah. So, gonna stall. He has 2 guaranteed lives, so he's going to get to fire off Burn at one point. Then his block gets popped. Then he gets to play another block, fire off some more Burn. It gets popped again. So he gets 3 waves of being able to try and kill Trump. And Trump has to respond to that with cards like Lothab and Healbot. And hope it's enough.
And interestingly enough, what this also does, it lets Firebat draw more cards to enable a possible better Emperor for even more, one-turn burst.
So there's the early Healbot. That does take away Trump's ability to heal now, and he did tap that turn, so still took a tiny bit of damage.
We have to see, though, if Firebat picks up another freeze. That might just be enough to... Oh, wow, he does.
Wow. Now there
perfect.
is an Owl, there's a Shadow Flame. Firebat has to expect one of those is there, so I doubt he'll go for the Doomsayer. That feels a little too optimistic.
Although if you do play it, and you get either of those out, you still have the board frozen, so you're buying yourself a bit more time to find perhaps another freeze to then drop Emperor, get that double or triple wave of Burn, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's the Alex.
The opportunity cost is the 2 cards that you get from the Arcane Intellect, though, so it doesn't feel like that's a risk that's worth taking.
Yeah, I think it was really smart of Firebat to not go for the Doomsayer. It's a greedy play you could see and be like, well, if it goes off, I win the game. But the odds it goes off are probably lower than the odds of winning the game if you just go for the draws.
Finding more cards to enable the Emperor, yeah.
So, Trump doesn't really have a way to fetch more cards to look for a second Healbot without life tapping. So, I mean, he wants to generally posture himself in a way to... At this point, it's almost like Firebat's playing Solitaire, and Trump's kind of sweating it out, like, will he kill me? Like, Trump has to...
Miracle Rogue, basically.
Yeah, he can... Like, Trump's kind of thinking, okay, I could Owl to deny him 1 card, or multiple cards even, potentially. I could Owl to push face damage, but I can't really pop him, so does that matter? I could put down Emperor. It doesn't really do much. It reduces some nice cards, I guess. And he has to think about like owling stuff. Does he dark bomb stuff? So it looks like he's gonna go for the 8 damage, which is surprising to me because this doesn't really change the clock.
Yeah, it doesn't accelerate it by much because if your board is gonna die, it's gonna die no matter what.
Yeah, and I mean he does have the Shadow Flame to protect him from the Frost Nova Doomsayer. So again, it'd be really heads up of Firebat to even seeing that owl not go for a Doomsayer play here.
And just go for Emperor straight up.
Yeah, just go for like he could draw more cards, Frost Nova again, and try to keep drawing into more burn. And as soon as he gets more burn, with the second Ice Block in hand, like next turn he can Alex him, and then maybe just burn him out. And there's more burn, so...
Yeah, I really kind of have to question the last owl play from Trump. Like, as you said, Chalky, it doesn't really change the clock. Like, you have 9 damage in your hand, but your opponent is at 10 health. And even if you use that 9 damage, like, one of them is still a Hellfire, which damages you for 3. Whereas if you use the owl on the Acolyte of Pain, like, he would be denying 2 draws, essentially.
Yeah. So the main thing here, Firebat's changing his play, right? So he's going for the Doomsayer, which you could look at and say, but, you know, he just didn't go for it last turn. I don't think it's because he saw the owl. I think it's morely because he didn't have anything else to do. Like, he could draw, but he would overdraw. He could play Blood Mage, but you don't want to just throw that out. He had nothing to play, so you might as well just also throw out this Doomsayer, force out the Shadow Flame. He could choose not to Shadow Flame the Giant, but it would cost him a Dark Bomb. He could cost him a Dark Bomb, Shadow Flaming something else.
You know, I kind of like Dr. Boom. If you're playing around board-wise at any point, the Boombots could seal the game, assuming the opponent's not able to heal up. Assuming he whiffs on everything and he doesn't have lethal, the Boombots could help later on.
If Trump had 1 more mana, he could go for something crazy like Hellfire, Dr. Boom, and potentially in the game.
Well, the Boombots, unfortunately, like they can't get put on the board right now because it's full.
He can't get rid of his board because he can't cast Hellfire as well as play Boom. So he's at 19, and Firebat has a lot of damage. He can set him to 15 with Alex. He can play Emperor so that he can get more flexibility with his cards. Right now, I believe he only has maybe like 15, maybe a little more. Yeah, he has 16. And there is no heal from Trump. Firebat doesn't know that, but he's already seen the 1 heal bot.
There might be a second one. Just the only thing you're afraid of is that, you know, Trump is going to go back up to 23 health as soon as you bring him down to 15.
Yep.
But with 2 turns of Ice Block ahead of you, I mean, the only thing that could really go down is Heal Bot into low step. Like, that would be the absolute worst sequence of cards, but even then you might be able to pull it off at the last second by stalling.
So he's thinking over this Alex. I mean, I think the only other play would be like Arcane Intellect into Emperor.
Yeah, to maximize the value of the amount of coins you get, basically.
I feel like even though Firebat's hand is really large, it's like, I would say below average for this point in the game. He would definitely want more burn damage in his hand, and at which point he could play Emperor instead of this Alex. This Alex
just wants more flexible burn, rather. Like, it's... Like, if you have both Ice Lances, or if you have the Pyroblast, you could have Pyroed last turn and just gone for it.
Yeah, this doesn't feel as good. The Alex, like, you expect this to be dealt with a BGH, right? And it essentially did 3 damage.
Yeah, it did 4.
It did 4, but still.
4.
Yeah, I don't even think you have to BGH it if you're Trump. At this point, he's just dead to burn if he doesn't draw that heal bot, and he will end up tapping for it. He didn't get it, and
he expects to be dead. I mean, the only play I could see him do here is like double trade 3/3 and win 5/5 into Alex. Hope your opponent only has Flame Strikes to deal with your board, and then he ends up Flame Striking Dr. Boom and you win. But that's like the only possible way.
Yeah, there's not much going for him here. I mean, he knows Firebat's cycled through so many cards.
Yeah, and
he's gonna try.
He's just dead.
Yep.
Yep.
Those Boombots, man. I hope Firebat doesn't try some funky BM because it's gonna burn.
Doesn't look like he's going for the exact lethal potentially. Maybe a little overkill. Yeah. Well, there it is.
But I mean, Shaki, why would you show the second Frostbolt? It's too much information.
It's too much. Yeah, it's too much information in Conquest. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Like next week, your opponents are playing against you. They're like, do you really think he plays 2?
2 Frostbolt and Freeze Mage, that doesn't seem very likely.
Well,
What is
there's
that
already
deck?
so much freeze. Like, why
Yeah,
do you need 2?
You can cut Frostbolt, sounds just about fine.
I mean,
Oh, man.
stranger things have happened. People are cutting Fiery War Axe in Warrior.
Right.
And that's like a card I never expected anyone to cut in Warrior.
Mhm.
It's after all,
it's-
there's the Fiery Wind Axe.
You're right. But I don't know. It's I guess people have started valuing card draw so much in Patron Warrior that they really don't care much about anything else. Like there have been versions of Patron Warrior that are just inconsistent across the board that run nothing but draw. So it's been those have been kind of funny to look at. Now, Xixo is the only one left on Team Archon to have to get a win with his Rogue, and he's up against at least a 50-50 with the Rogue. He's up against a Handlock and the Druid from Kibler. So we mentioned earlier, you know, Druid might have a bit of an edge there. Handlock, some people think Rogue is favored, some people think Warlock's favored, but for the last one, it's going to be a coin flip pretty much no matter what.
This part is actually really interesting to me because now the team has to decide collectively what deck is best against this Rogue. And I think like from a Druid perspective, like from Kibler's perspective, he might think that Druid is really favored against Rogue, but Dog being a Rogue specialist, he might think that, hey, I'm more favored with just the mirror against Rogue. So it's kind of a lineup of who is the dominant personality on his team, basically.
It's especially funny because there's all 3 of them left.
Right.
So it's like, normally, you know, it might be 2 players that have to talk it out, but in this case, it's like a 3-way discussion of like who not only thinks their deck is favored, but that they're favored, they have experience, all this stuff. And if you're a Value Town fan, I think I've kind of thought about this. The worst thing you could see here is Dog to queue up, because that means that they have collectively decided that their other 2 decks are unfavored more than
Yeah,
the
that would be awful. Although you could say also the Dog is such a rogue specialist that they hedge their bets on him winning the mirror match more often than not.
Yeah.
So, although at this this level of play, again, it comes down to minute differences in the way people play out their decks, and I think the mulligan is where it matters most. And when you have only one game as sample size, it's a little tough sometimes to make a huge distinction. So again, if you guys have any thoughts about the matches coming right up, you can tweet #ATLC. Any thoughts? Feel free to share them. They might show up on screen. Now, what do you think? Like from your perspective, what would you queue up as Value Town? Like knowing averages, Monk. You know, and the stats, the cold hard math. What would you queue up?
Definitely Druid. Druid. Okay, just like going by the stats, or Rogue Mirror is 50-50. We're gonna ignore that screen for now. It's 50-50. Or Rogue versus Druid is 37%, and Oil Rogue versus Handlock is 57%. So just going by the stats, I would queue up Druid, Mirror, and then Handlock.
All right.
Okay.
So that seems to make sense. I mean, Xixo is playing against Kibler's nothing. But is it Kibler that's going to be playing here? Because I have to assume it is. That both
Probably.
players are going to be facing off, but the name of the classes has been
Now,
mixed up a bit.
this is kind of
Something-
where the Master of Duels and the team tiebreakers collide. Because if you're Kibler, you probably just like, if you're gonna lose, you don't want to play. You're like, no, I'll sit on my 9-1 record, guys. No thanks.
Yeah.
Right.
But the team, for the best of the team, he needs to go first.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Another thing to consider is like the amount of weapon hate is in each player's decks. Not only is Sixo playing Rogue, he's playing a very weapon-based version of Rogue that runs the Assassin's Blade and 2 of the Goblin Auto Barbers. So weapon hate is going to be really good against him. I know Trump really prefers 1 Ooze in his deck, and Kibler, he's running Druid, so like every Druid list has Harrison Jones in the deck. Meanwhile,
Right.
Rogue, Dog's Rogue probably doesn't have any anti-weapon stuff, so that's also something to consider.
Yeah. Well, I mean, weapon hate has been prevalent pretty much everywhere for good reason. It takes away a lot of the good. I mean, even against... And I guess the field is so diverse that it's really hard to really pin against which class you're meaning to play that weapon hate. But when you see Shaman come back with their Doomhammers, Patron's always around. You've got Control Warrior cropping up to beat Patron. You've got Rogue that's just doing somewhat well against the entire field. It's kind of interesting to see that weapon hate is just overall something you put in against the entire field rather than a specific deck nowadays.
No ramp again
Oh,
for Kibler is
wow.
the first thing we see.
And, well, there's no prep sprint, prep sap, prep eviscerate, prep everything for Xixo either.
Well, yeah, prep is going to be pretty big with the hand he has with the 2 Tinkers and the Sprint, but double hero power, and he's going to get the initiative, which is pretty big. He can just coin out Violet Teacher.
Yeah, and I don't see any other play from him, and he's got the double backstab, the SI to go with the dagger in case the Shredder comes out, which it undoubtedly will. Kibler's gonna have to really come up with
It's gonna be
draws.
tough.
Yeah.
It's gonna be really tough.
What if
I always say
Millhouse?
getting an early Violet Teacher out with a few tokens is like the best thing you can do against Druid, especially if they don't hit wild growth, because they won't be able to like swipe hero power or swipe wrath to deal with this Violet Teacher.
Do you think you would SI first? I think I'd just take the 4.
Yeah, I would.
It's so
too.
likely to be a 3/2, right?
What if Millhouse, and then you don't have the 2 damage from the backstab?
I guess
Okay,
he's
well,
gonna go
never mind.
super aggressive, use both backstabs, but I think I would have liked to save one with the Azure Drake for next turn. I don't know.
Swipe would be a big help here for Kibler, who picks
Right.
up nothing but a Savage Roar.
Oh man.
This has got to feel awful.
Yep. This is kind of how fates change. I mean,
This is how, you know, it's funny because we speak of Druid sometimes. It's like you see it in a tournament, you're like, yeah, Druid is dominant. And then you look back at the VODs and you realize it's really just, they all got Wild Growth, they all got Innervate. And then you see the same, you know, the same classes being played in the future tournament and it just does nothing.
so there's prep. I wouldn't be surprised to see him trade in a 1/1, yeah, instead of using his face just to preserve the dagger now for the oils coming up. Next turn, you could even just see double oil.
Oh, man.
Well, maybe
That-
not.
Yeah.
It's not a great Harrison. Yeah, I feel like Thorison's a little better, so.
Well,
Yeah.
Thorson Jones.
I feel like it's not that great of a Thorson either. Like just
Ooh.
judging by the number of cards that are in Kibler's deck, I feel like he definitely needs a swipe in this case.
Yeah, and a sap with the Tinkers, with an Auto Barber.
Yeah.
Is this it? Is this where it all comes crashing down?
So many options.
I mean, at first I think you'd probably, let's see, you'd want to just, you could either prep out the oil, or you could play Auto Barber first. It really depends. You have to kind of think about the sequencing of where you want the oil to hit. Because you can prep either oil or sap this turn. And you still end up with, you know, the same amount of cards being able to be played.
Oof,
So-
that's painful. That doesn't get swiped ever.
Yeah,
Too soon.
that's first
That's
oil
rough.
hits. I assume the Auto Barber is going to come down as well, and that's a 7 minion board on turn 6. All hitting face.
Well, you know, he's all about that face.
Yeah, and I mean, that's
That's
almost
rough.
too much damage. Yeah, it's like, what can you really do?
You can try to
Might
Harrison
innervate now. Oh, wow.
and then draw into nothing basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough turn to think about what even gives you a chance to win. But I feel like if you're going to win, it involves the cards in 6-0's hands not being the cards that they are. Like, Sprint is one of those things you can't assume they have, and Oil is probably the most damaging card 6-0 could have.
Again, even if Kibler had the ideal hand at this point, I don't think he could.
He
come
couldn't even
back.
cast it, right? Like, how does he
Yeah.
even cast it and then live to the following turn? Even if he had double
If
swipe,
you had double swipe, that would be
that would
okay.
save him
You'd
for
survive.
now. And even then, it's still a stretch.
So this is what he's found as far as surviving, I suppose. Will this save him, though? I don't think it does.
Yeah, I don't think it does at all. I think he's still
Dead.
dead on board.
Dead on board, so...
Wow, Kibler's win streak is gonna
Comes
end
to
there,
an
and
end.
Team Archon is gonna be taking this series. Not only did Value Town not get the tiebreaker that we're looking for, but Kibler's score is, creeping slowly towards Hyped or Firebass, whichever of them is close behind him.
Yeah, it's not quite there, but if Hype
Hmm.
goes like 2-0, he's getting there.
Yeah.
I mean, still Kibler will retain his lead by the end of this week. He went
Yeah.
9-2, I believe, so far, and no
Right.
one can beat that. The best is Hyped, and at best he can do 9-3.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
he's got
we're
7-3
talking,
right now. Yeah.
We're talking like it's so bad that he lost, but he's definitively still in first place.
Right, he's still very far ahead. I mean, it doesn't take, like we say, it's, you know, it's really not that difficult for a player to lose, you know, multiple games in a row. Like Kibler get a really bad week, but then it's still not as, it's still the same difficulty of that happening for Hyped. I mean, he might just get a really bad week, and then suddenly Kibler's lead is even better than it is now. So it could happen. It's one of those things. We'll see how it evolves going in forward. So 6-3, pretty good score for Team Archon. I mean,
Yeah.
didn't have 6-5 as we were talking
Yeah.
about earlier.
Definitely one of the
actually-
more dominating scores. I believe no one's gotten anything above 6-3. There's been no
Yeah.
6-2s, for example.
This also puts Archon ahead of Value Town, so gonna push them from third place into first place. I believe Nihilum is still technically in first place unless they lose next match. But yeah, as you can see from the standings, Archon has pushed themselves ahead of Value Town with this win. And this pretty much puts Value Town from having a nice first place lead to kind of back in the pack. You see 6 of the teams have 2 losses. At the end of this week, there's still going to be a big scramble in the middle for second through 6th place, second through 7th place, rather.
Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, there's really no huge leader, which just goes to show that a lot of the people in this, you know, the entire league so far have been very close in skill, and the teams have been working pretty well together. Even some of the unexpected big winners, you know, Forsen Boys, you know, initially you guys just took everyone by storm, had pretty, you know, bad weeks. The past 2 weeks were really rough, but hopefully you guys this week will be able to come back. And then again, you know, everybody's kind of close together points-wise.
Yeah, and in fact, Forsen Boys will be playing in the next match. What can you tell me about that, Chalky?
Well, we're going up against Nihilum. We're really looking, you know, we've lost 2 weeks in a row, and Nihilum's in first place, so we're looking to kind of dethrone them. Maybe we can move back into, like, second place territory. Top 2 is really where you want to be, so if we can get to 3-2, we will be, if you ignore tiebreakers, we'd be in a multiple-way tie for first place, so
Right.
it'd be a great position to be in after week 5, so it's pretty much kind of getting to that do or die point. I mean, there's 3 weeks left. This is a really huge week for us. It's a huge week for every team. This week's really going to define whether you're leading the pack or behind. And for a team like Celestial, it's a week where they have to start winning or else they're mathematically eliminated.
They're out. Yeah, exactly. They can't possibly climb back in. So that's going to be a really big week for them. We're, you know, the further along you go, the more important the wins become. So, you know, before we go, we're going to start your matches, Shocky. A quick shout out to Amazon App Store for sponsoring the event and Alpha Draft if you guys want to check them out. You know, Esports Fantasy League. So if you want to check that out, alphadraft.com and amazon.com/Hearthstone for some, you know, discounts on the card packs that you can get. Shocky, again, thanks for casting.
Yeah,
I wish you
it was a
luck
pleasure.
in your games. Hope you do
All
well.
right, man.
We're going to take a short break right now, and when we get back, we're going to have Liquid Savitz with us casting Nihilum versus Forsen Boys. Check that out right after this.